Wait,
No,
motherfucker, how you gonna
no,
tell
no,
me?
no. You can't. No, no, brother. You can't insult me. I have no problem with being insulted. But when
Right.
the tools that they used to insult me did not come from your cabinet, but it's
Yeah.
other people's cabinet, especially white supremacist cabinet, I don't know where you're coming from. Where you're coming from. If all the tools that you're using to insult me is white supremacist tools. So a black man using white supremacists to hold on another black man. You don't have a problem with that?
Because you think that we are somehow a collective. Um, African Americans, or many African Americans, have picked up individualistic um, ideas and picked up a lot of quote unquote Eurocentric ideas. So you could say it's coming from the white man, but a lot of people at this point, that's where they get the ideas from. It's
Yeah,
not.
but
It's not about.
they're
It's not
all
about. It's not about. It didn't come from them. They truly
yeah,
believe
yeah,
what Tony
yeah.
is saying. Tony truly believes that. If y'all talking about Tony, I don't know if
I,
y'all. But
we
what
want to talk
Chief
about
X is
Tony,
saying, Chief
but
X
Brad,
believes that. Yeah.
but Brad, I want to leave this topic right because I want to keep talking about the brother while
Right.
I ain't. Why am
Right.
I calling him a fucking brother? He ain't no motherfucking brother. I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to talk about him while he's not here, right? But
Mm-hmm.
um, he said that Darwinism and survival of the fittest is gonna take care of me or whatever, right? And my thing
Damn.
is this, right? Yeah, my thing is this, right? My thing is this, right? We all are inculcated in a European system, Indo-European Western society. That's the culture that we're all raised in. So don't think that I'm saying like, you know what I mean? Like I'm just outside of that. But what I'm saying is like the passive aggressive tactics where somewhat why are you mad? Are you getting mad or the intelligence thing? That's like his main thing. Like so because it doesn't help that you already promote the whole IQ thing and this idea that our ancestral group potentially, right, could just be inferior intellectually compared to other groups, right? You promote that already, right? So then, if me and you get into any kind of a disagreement, that's always where you go. So that lets me know you think overall that the vast majority of our people are cognitively below you. That's
Who said
clear.
that? Who said that?
He doesn't say it, Brass, but it's clear in
Who?
his
Who said it?
attitude.
Who's you talking about
I,
Tony?
nah, not talking about Tony. We talking about Fetty.
Oh, Fetty.
Fetty.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I wasn't in here. I didn't hear y'all conversation. That's all. I'm trying
Nah,
to
you
figure out.
started a conversation in the chat yesterday, but
No, in the chat. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I didn't
in
know
the
what you was right.
Discord, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. We could insult each other and get back good, right? But I can't get back good with you if I know on a fundamental level you believe that the vast
Black people are
majority
idiots.
of our group, right, is intellectually inept. You believe that, and you believe that I'm part of that intellectually inept group.
Right.
That can't be rectified. Like that can't. There's nowhere to grow from that.
We can't reconcile that.
You can't
Cannot
reconcile it.
reconcile it. Mm-mm. Cannot. If a man in them heart and heart really believe, and but he cannot explain that in believe it, but everything in point to is that is in belief system. That black people don't, that black people shouldn't have money. Remember the day when the dude come in and say, oh, black people with the money and the reparation, and then from I hear him start talking, I said, okay, there was another incident where you stopped me and then ask him a question, and then I say back off and say, go stupid. Because black people will call other black people dumb on a whole, generalize it. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
seriously? I'm not saying that we don't have dumb black people, but the general population of black people dumb, right?
Nah, I think when I stopped you, I remember that. That was Joey, if you remember that conversation.
Yeah.
That was when
Yeah,
remember we were
he
talking
does it.
about if
He
all the
does it
money in the
too.
world was to if
It's
we
Yes.
were
gonna
to
go right
spread
back.
all of the money equally, would it make it back into the same hands? And he
Yes.
just immediately started talking about black people. And I was like, what the hell are you? What do you mean by, like, why are you talking about black? We're not talking about black people right now. We're talking about the whole world. He was like, nah, but blacks don't know what to do with money. And they ain't figured it out. And the only thing I found strange, Stu, that's how I tell you calm down, because I thought you were about to cuss him out, is that I don't like those terms because it happened again today. When we're talking about the whole world and you just immediately just say, well, black people don't know what the hell. So yeah, they'll probably just give it back. I'm like, bro, we're talking about everyone. And what pissed Corey off today is we was talking about Charlie Kirk. And then the first comment out of Tony's mouth was, well, what about black on black crime in Chicago? Like, what the fuck did that got to do with what we're talking about? So that, like, it's funny, them little Freudian slips will let you know what a motherfucker actually thinks.
Right.
You know, what's really behind what's going on.
No, you see, once you start listening, boss, you see, once you start listening to many of these individuals, you realize that you can't be in my army. You cannot be in my army. You realize that deep down in the subconscious, what they really think, they have been indoctrinated and they continue to listen to these far-right people. And it's a dangerous thing to the black community because everything now, I'm not saying some things are not black people's fault, but you start overlook that and say everything is black people's fault. It's we alone.
Think about it. All the people on this panel, I see DQ up here, I see Miss Sincere up here, I see Smalls, myself, Chef, Stu Peas, Anathema, and Brass, right?
Mm.
The whole, if we give black people money, they're just gonna buy Jordans and rims. If you subscribe to that, then you're basically saying at least about 4 out of 10 of the people on this panel is just gonna buy a bunch of Jordans.
Yeah,
Jordans.
Essentially, yes. Essentially, yeah. Yep.
So you're saying that black people dumb. That's what you're saying.
Essentially, yeah. I'm not gonna. That's the feeling that I got. I mean, I can hear a motherfucker when they talk, and I ain't gotta call them a name about it, but I can hear a motherfucker when he talks. If I get the feeling that that's where you're going, then you know, it is what it is. But I run from those kinds of conversations.
You know what about my boss? I used to believe that it's unique. That is one nigger thing like that. That's one nigger in a million. But the more I'm talking to people, I realize that this YouTube is good, but this YouTube is doing some damage in this community that's second to none. That some people selling some information and people buying it. When I look at how the red pill argument went ablaze in the community, and I said, seriously? High school dude who couldn't get in the pussy, all of a sudden now, them is high value people, so they have high value expectations. And I said, if it wasn't for YouTube, you wouldn't be thinking this way. Every morning in Africa, a lion gets up and he knows that he has to be faster than the slowest gazelle to survive. And every morning, a gazelle gets up and he knows that he has to be faster than the fastest lion to survive. It's survival. Right? Nobody is gifted anything. We know that. That's why
this
Trump
is live too, y'all.
Yeah, that's why Trump don't bother me. Because I know we can survive. Because we are always faster than the fastest lion. And we are always faster, if we're the lions, than the slowest gazelle.
Yes, sir. All right, Brass, you ready?
Yeah. Let's get it.
All right, so I want to first start here. Let's frame the debate.
Mute everybody who's not in the debate and give an introduction. We're listening.
Okay. Yeah. No question.
Yeah. So yeah, this evening we're going to be debating if Garvey was a scam or not. You know, this is a pretty popular sentiment in I wouldn't say the black community. I say the black community at large doesn't look at it like that. I would say the people who look into, like, you know, who study like our past, right? Particularly on YouTube, I would say the general sentiment was that Garvey was a scammer. he never owned any ships, or he told people that he had ships when he didn't have any ships. So that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. We're going to exonerate Garvey, and we're going to put him in his rightful place. My contention is that he never scammed anyone whatsoever. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
My contention is simple. I think that Marcus Garvey, while being a great man, a few things can be true. While being a great man, well, a great historical figure, I think that he was definitely important in the story of our people on this continent and in Africa and in Jamaica. I would assume also, but that in order to believe that Marcus Garvey did not scam specifically Black people, but just scam in general. In order to believe that, I would have to believe that this intelligent man, who people think is brilliant, though he worked with W.E.B. Du Bois and all of that, you'd have to believe that he was an idiot. And the people that are saying that he wasn't scamming, you're actually playing with his intelligence, because either he was scamming or he was a bumbling fool when it came to business.
Okay.
My point.
All right. So I want to start here. Let's set some parameters, right? So I want to define, for the purposes of the debate, from what I, in my opinion, scamming / fraud. I want to define that term right quick, right? So I go to AI overview, and it says, in law, fraud is the intentional use of deceit, trickery, or dishonesty to gain an unfair advantage or deprive another of money, property, or a legal right, resulting in a harm or a loss to the victim. So that's how I'm going to be defining it for the purposes of this discussion. And that's what I'm going to say that Garvey never did. I'd like to know if my opponent.
One more time.
You want me to read it again?
Yeah, just read it real quick.
All right. So it says, in law, fraud is the intentional use of deceit, trickery, or dishonesty to gain an unfair advantage or deprive another of money, property, or a legal right, resulting in harm or loss to the victim.
Copy that and put it in the chat from me.
But you accede to that or no? You don't have to.
No, I just wanna listen. I know in debates the premises and certain things that you agree to will end up sinking you in the end. So before, I'm gonna have to take my time with that. With that, I just want to look through that for a second, and lay out your thought. I mean, and I know everybody is on mute, but if anybody had anything to weigh in on that topic, I mean, on that, not the topic, but the
definition.
That definition of fraud, I'll accept that from the people in the group, as if I should take that on face value. Because just know, Haskel, I know you're an upstanding guy, but we're debating each other. In debates, I don't accept anything at face value. I'm going to look into it beforehand. But go ahead, put it in the chat. I just want to make sure that jives with my version of scam. Anybody got a problem with that definition of fraud? Or is everybody just on mute? I know y'all get tired of me blaming y'all for being on mute.
Nah, I'm cool with that shit.
Yeah, I'm with that.
Haskel a motherfucking problem. That's all I'm gonna say. That boy nice with the linguistics, with the verbiage. He's a hellified orator.
Yeah, so was Garvey.
All right. I gotta watch this. This is a class style.
So was Garvey. So was Garvey. Hold on. Did you put it in the chat? I just want to analyze that, make sure that statement makes sense.
It's in the chat.
Oh, hold on. I'm terrible with the general chat part. Terrible.
But remember, if you want to add an addenda, it's not in the general chat. It's in this chat, the bubble.
No,
the
that's
little
what I'm
message.
saying. I'm terrible with that. I'm like, when people say put in the chat, I never look in the chat of the Discord ever.
Okay.
Yeah, you said remember.
Oh, what was I saying? I lost my train of thought. I was gonna say, remember, if you want to add an addendum to that, you don't have to necessarily accept the definition. We can, just as a work, just so the discussion could go forward. But if you want to add a qualifier to that you believe should still fall within the realm of what you would consider scamming, you can still do so. I just wanted the audience to know the perspective that I'm coming at it from.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay. All right, go ahead. I think we could do this. I mean, it's not fluid. This is fluid, so it's not from. Go ahead and go. I'm listening to you. Now present your.
all right, perfect.
Present your.
I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So, boom, we're gonna get started. All right, so we're gonna start with the trial of Marcus Garvey for mail fraud, right? So, of course, Marcus Garvey was the vice president of the Black Star Line. So him, Orlando Thomas, who was the treasurer of the organization, George Tobias, and his secretary, Ely Garcia, were all indicted for mail fraud in February of 1922. By the way, all of this stuff that I have is being read from one article or one section of a book, and I'm going to be putting the link for that in the chat because he has a bibliography at the end with all the sources and everything. So just so y'all know. All right, so they were indicted for mail fraud in February of 1922. Immediately after that, the government seized all of their books. Then the prosecutors also mailed questionnaires to all 35,000 Black Star Liner stockholders looking to accumulate evidence, right? All right, so the trial begins a year later. The litigation begins in an uproar as Garvey dismisses his attorneys who encouraged him to cop a plea. So I want to enter that as my first exhibit to say that this counts for points for Garvey for not being a scammer because no, I'm not copping no plea. I didn't scam anyone, right? Garvey felt that the lawyers were setting him up. From the outset of the trial, the courtroom atmosphere seemed permeated by hostility and scorn. The prosecutor famously admonished the jury during his closing argument by saying, quote, "Gentlemen, will you let the tiger loose?" His statement indicated an obvious bias, as there were 3 other defendants in the case. So it's clear Garvey was who they wanted, right? Now, of course, Garvey was found guilty on one count of using the mail to defraud, right? So let's see here. For years, historians have doubted the legitimacy of Garvey's conviction. So now we're going to examine the merits of those doubts by conducting a legal analysis and investigation of the facts. So the first thing we're going to look at is the judge. Judge Julian Mack. Judge Mack was known for his enthusiastic dedication to political causes. Benjamin Cohen, a well-known jurist, once noted concerning Judge Mack, he did not merely lend his name to movements, he was active, a doer, right? His compatriot, Judge Hand, felt that this activism sometimes put Mack's neutrality into question. So I want to enter that in as a second exhibit. The judge who was on Garvey's case, his compatriots, his colleagues, thought that his neutrality was questionable even prior to this trial. Right now, relevant to this case is the fact that Judge Mack not only ideologically sympathized with the NAACP, but he also maintained a membership in the organization and made financial contributions to it. More than that, Judge Mack participated in meetings that finally led to the formation of the NAACP. So he's a founding member and presided at early meetings addressed by the militant intellectual W.E.B. Du Bois, who everyone should know who's familiar with this story is basically Garvey's arch nemesis, right? So Judge Mack's involvement with the NAACP, I'm not going to read all of that. We established that Judge Mack is not only a member of the NAACP, funds them, he's a founding member, pays money into it, and at one point presided over meetings, right? And he was a colleague of W.E.B. Du Bois. All right. Now, the next point I want to read is on the day before the trial was set to begin, Judge Mack received a mysterious correspondence from James Weldon Johnson, secretary of the NAACP, in relation to the Garvey case. Regardless of the contents of that correspondence, the mere existence of such contacts between the NAACP and Judge Mack speaks to the judge's susceptibility to bias. All right. So we're going to go into the legal issues as to why Garvey should have not been convicted. So legal issue number one, Judge Mack wrongfully failed to recuse himself by committing a lie of omission. At trial, Garvey presented a petition for Judge Mack to recuse himself from the case. Only 3 years before this trial, the Supreme Court handed down a landmark decision on judicial disqualification. It's called Berger versus United States. It basically states that in order for judicial bias to be sufficient for recusal, and recusal means the judge taking himself off of the case, the bias must be based upon something other than the rulings in the case. Right? Now, let's see here. We're going to skip that. So it can't be anything frivolous, but it has to be substantial, right? So Garvey files a motion for recusal. And this was based on the fact that Judge Mack had a membership in and had an affiliation with the NAACP. Although the NAACP was not technically a party to the case, it was one of the leading entities that demanded the investigation, right? Garvey included in his petition the full letter written to the Attorney General advocating for his indictment, in which 4 of the 8 signatories currently held office in the NAACP, right? So 4 of the people who signed the petition to the Attorney General to pursue charges against Garvey were in the NAACP. Garvey argued that exposure to such propaganda against him had caused the judge to be unconsciously swayed to the side of the government against the petitioner, prejudicing him in the very issues of which will come before your honor at trial. He's speaking to the appellate court when he uses that language, right? Because this is his appeal. Let's see. Is Garvey's allegations of bias, related were found heavy on Garvey's found in meetings. So we already covered that, him being a founding member. In denying the petition for recusal, Judge Mack admitted that he contributed to the NAACP and read its magazine, but refused to confirm his membership within the NAACP. He disclosed that he read the NAACP's journal, asserting that he had only perhaps glanced at the headlines. However, Judge Mack then contended that if newspaper articles can be found to persuade judges, then a judge, unlike the jury, would never be allowed to read newspapers. Additionally, he argued that his affiliation with the NAACP only showed extreme friendliness towards the colored people because of a very strong feeling that colored people needed extreme friendliness of every fair-minded person. So he's already being disingenuous, in my opinion, right? Saying that, oh, my connection with them, I don't even read the paper like that. I just read the headlines. And, my affiliation with them, oh, that's just because black folks need friends. I'm not tied in with them like that. You know. So moving on. Notwithstanding his verbal assurances, right? The fact of his affiliation and support alone, that alone by itself satisfies the extrajudicial and substantiality requirements for the Berger test. Remember, Berger was that case that was done before this case that said that a judge had to recuse himself, blah 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 blah, right? So even without being a member, because remember, he's denying being a member, right? He admits to affiliation and he admits to financial support. That alone is enough for him to have been recused, right? Now, let's see here. Ba, 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 ba. All right. So once it is found that a judge should have recused himself but did not do so, what next? As stated in Berger, the remedy by appeal is inadequate. So a simple appeal is not enough. It comes after the trial. And if prejudice has existed, it has worked its evil and judgment of it in a review. Excuse me. Let me read that sentence again. It comes after the trial, and its prejudice has already done its damage. So going before a tribunal, aka an appellate court, is precarious, meaning that it's already so biased that an appellate court is not enough. Like, it goes there fortified with presumptions, and nothing can be more elusive of estimate or decision than a disposition of mind in which there is a personal ingredient. So, in other words, the Supreme Court stated that an appellate decision based on a biased trial at a lower court is necessarily tarnished by that lower court's conclusions and assumptions. And in such a situation, expungement of the district court decision itself appears to be the only valid resolution, right? So, according to the Berger case, if you have that type of bias where the judge was supposed to recuse himself and didn't, that trial is supposed to be expunged, terminated, right? And you could potentially start a new trial. So let's go to legal issue number 2. Judge Mack erred in not addressing perjured testimony by a prosecution witness. Give me a second, y'all. I got some background. All right. So it says, under cross-examination, Schuler Cargill, a 19-year-old office boy, represented himself as a BSL employee who had mailed the letter to Dancy. So Dancy was the guy who this case is basically built around. The sole count on which the government convicted Garvey, the allegation that Garvey caused to be mailed a letter soliciting Dancy's, his name is Benny Dancy, purchase of BSL shares when the organization was near insolvency. Meaning that this is what most people who say that Garvey is a scammer, this is the talking point that they typically bring up, is the fact that Garvey was selling ships knowing that he either had no ships or his company was pretty much already over with. Like, everything was pretty much already done, and he still was pumping out these advertisements to lure in new financiers, right? All right, boom. So under cross-examination, Cargill, the 19-year-old office boy, he was the only witness who testified that he was an actual participant in BSL sending of false advertisements by mail. Now, I don't want that to go over y'all head. Let me read that one more time on some Umar shit. Cargill was the only witness who testified that he was an actual participant in BSL sending of false advertisements by U.S. mail. All right. Later in his cross-examination, he admitted that the prosecutor, Maxwell Maddock, had told him to lie on the stand. And with that, I'm going to take a little respite. I'd like for my opponent to enter the fray, give any critique possibly of what I read so far, or to say that he accedes to this first point of contention. So I'm going to cede the floor.
That was interesting. You went to a few areas. Now, quick question: Am I responding to you, or am I presenting? Or are we doing the presenting like in a closing argument? I'm confused
Yeah,
right
so
now.
I'm going to present all the way through because I'm not done, but I didn't want to just keep reading to where, I wanted to break up the monotony a bit. And before I went on, I wanted to gather your thoughts on just that portion of the argument. And then I'm going to continue on with the rest.
Oh, okay, cool. You said a lot of truths, but one of the things that we have to understand about fraud is malintent and loss. The case is, did he defraud? The case is not, was it a racial climate? The case is not, and Burger doesn't fit, but I wrote it down.
Okay. So you're of the opinion that the judge shouldn't have recused himself.
My earbud died. I gotta put a new earbud in.
All right.
No worries at all. Take your time to get that earbud swapped out and comfortable. I'm
here. Okay, Siri. Siri, thank you. I'll get the earbud myself.
Yeah. So the question I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to continue after that is, so are you of the opinion that the evidence presented by Garvey with the letter, the guy contacting him from the NAACP before the trial and all of that stuff?
Yeah. I'm gonna address it directly. I wasn't fully. I didn't know the angle that you were coming into this. I didn't know how you're doing it, but I'll address that directly.
Okay, and that's why I wanted to stop too, because I know I didn't want to bombard you and the audience with just a bunch of information,
right?
Without it being broken up. So I'm going to continue.
Hold on one second. I can hear you in my ear, but I shouldn't be in here. Hold on one second. I'm getting an echo. Go ahead. Hey, Garen, hand me my what's name.
You good to go?
No, give me 1 second. I gotta mute out. I got an echo.
All right. So anybody want to jump in? We're gonna do 2 minutes. Anybody that's on the Discord panel, you could go ahead and jump in and speak to that first point that I made, or the first argument, while Brass get his stuff together. So anybody want to chime in?
No, they probably don't.
Okay.
I still got an echo. What the fuck am I doing?
Are you saying that Garvey? Are you trying to insinuate that Garvey trial was unfair from the beginning? That the judge that was involved in the trial. Okay, so you're establishing that one, the trial was unfair,
right,
and two, that the odds were stacked against him, right? The judge,
right.
And then you're also implying that there wasn't sufficient evidence because there's only one person that testified as to him committing mail fraud. That one person would mail a letter.
And that one person admitted that he perjured himself. Well, actually, I haven't gotten to that part yet.
Okay. So you're saying that there was insufficient evidence. It's based on hearsay of one person mailing a letter, because at that time I would have said it was a registered letter where there was proof that this letter was actually mailed out. If people understand what registered letters are, what is a registered letter?
Well, it was definitely. You know what? I don't want to give away my position, but yeah. What is your opinion on the on Judge Mack recusing himself? From what I read, do you believe that he should have recused himself?
A judge recusing himself is based on many factors, because if we follow the judicial system, many cases will be held up based on the fact that some judge has intimate information about an ongoing trial before the trial happened. Garvey was a prominent figure. He was a well-known figure, one of the well-known black men at that time. So everybody has heard about Garvey. Are you saying that the judge have a history of being unfair when it comes to the prosecution of black men? Because you have to
No.
establish that.
No. That's not what I said. Remember, in the first part is affiliation, his
Yeah.
financial support, the fact that he was a
Mhm.
founding member of the NAACP, and he was a crony of Garvey's arch nemesis, W.E.B. Du Bois. So that's the bias, not just the black thing. And
Okay.
the NAACP, four of the people who signed the petition to bring Garvey up on charges, four of the 8 people who signed were members of the NAACP. So it's on. You ready, Brass?
Yeah. So I'm gonna address just the topics. I wrote them down. So I'm gonna start with your last topic to try to keep it rare. Darcy was not the Nancy Cargill was not the only witness. They had postal officials, they had investors, they had former Black Star employees like Nancy Cargill, who described how the brochures were created and sent. But they also had financial and accounting witnesses, all in regards to this trial. So he was not. His testimony was important, but his testimony that you're saying that they told him to lie about was corroborated by many others. Now, I will see to the point that he lied because these are points of history. These people can go look them up. But they also noted in Second Circuit 1925 that the evidence was sufficient regardless of the disputes over his credibility. And then on top of that, you're saying he committed perjury, but no perjury charges were ever filed. So the allegations most certainly exist, but legally they were never proven. Judge Julian Mack, he doesn't have any evidence of anti-black bias. In fact, he was considered a friend to black civil rights. Now, he may not have been perceived by Garvey um, because the argument that Garvey had was not that he was biased against blacks. The argument is that he was biased against him
Right.
personally. So it wasn't racial bias in like a white supremacist kind of sense. It was a conflict of interest bias that he
Right.
was getting into. And I'm gonna go into these points. I'm gonna go into these points real quick. So he wasn't the only witness. Nancy Cargill was definitely an insider, and he was a witness, but there were many. They remember this is a trial where no, even in the climate, that's kind of in my argument. I'll go back to that in a second. Here's the other issue. The case was not centered in and around in him. That was my main point. You made the statement that the case was centered around Cargill, but if they're like even Stupes just said, this is a case where there was an over abundance of evidence pointing to it, plus his own signature, which I'll get into later. But I just want to speak to your points, and I like the way you're doing this. That way we can keep it somewhat. Now, you mentioned that the Supreme Court saying in a bias in lower court, according to Berger, should result in expungement. But the reason why it didn't is because, similar to what Stupes just said, Berger sets a principle and the burden is high. You must prove actual bias, not association. So by you saying that he was associated with NAACP, that doesn't prove bias. That just proves association. There's no actual bias. His connection did give an appearance, but it was not judged personally. We're talking about law, right? So we could talk about opinions and what we think, but the law stated that if bias had been proven under Berger, the conviction would have and should have been reversed. I agree with you there, but there was an appellate court that ruled on that said that the threshold wasn't met. When you say that under Berger, max bias should have meant expungement, then if max bias met the Berger test, the second circuit court wouldn't have reversed it. And even if you toss Mac, the jury still saw a doctored ship brochure, $630,000 missing, roughly at $5 a time from poor black folks at the time. There was $630,000 missing that was not accounted for. And then also false financials. That's fraud with or without the bias of Mac, even if that's perceived. When you talk about and I'm just addressing your points. And when I present my argument, once you get through yours, when you go through, one of the things that I've always considered when you were talking about this was we are talking about 1920, right? So we're not going to act like the climate of the time wasn't racist, right? So the climate was most certainly racist. Hoover, he literally was targeting Marcus Garvey. He was admitting to doing that. So I want to get this out the way. He wanted Garvey, quote unquote, out the picture. The U.S. system in the 20s was hostile. His affiliation with the NAACP, Judge Mack's affiliation with the NAACP, and the fact that Garvey was tried in New York, it gave the appearance of definite bias, no question. But the core facts, and this is one of the things I want to do in this conversation. Whenever you hear the words bias, I want you to also understand that none of that was ever proven in any court. Every time you hear anything in regards to perjury, just don't forget the pure fact of the crime, that there were witnesses, an overabundance of evidence, $630,000 missing. Now, I'm only talking about this scam because I want to just what Haskel was talking about. So federal juries in New York in the 1920s were overwhelmingly white. So that environment surely didn't help them. But here's the key. The jury's job in this particular case, we're not talking about all the cases. Me and Haskel are not here to talk about racist juries in 1920. We're here to talk about the Marcus Garvey case. So did the jury, that all-white jury, did they like Marcus Garvey? Probably not, right? They could have lynched him. If they wanted to lynch him, they would have. But the jury's job wasn't to like him. It was to decide whether those goddamn brochures and mailings constituted fraud. And his conviction wasn't based on his speeches or his nationalism. It was based on the paper trail that he left. Because that racism doesn't conjure up a fake-ass ship photo. It doesn't invent $630,000 in missing money. The jury saw those receipts, and that's why they convicted him. So I want to go back to your other points. I'm trying to do your points. So let's get into Mac's affiliation with the NAACP. Mac's affiliation with the NAACP, he was a prominent Jewish American jurist. For the people that don't know him, he was a progressive and civic leader. He was known for his involvement in reform causes, child labor, juvenile courts, and philanthropy. His connection to the NAACP, like Haskel said, was that he's a founding member of the NAACP. He chaired NAACP meetings. This affiliation was well known, and he was a public supporter of civil rights causes of Black people. Now, why this matters is Garvey's obvious defense, like Haskel said, was that would prove bias, because everybody knows, or if you don't know, the boys, if Garvey was Joker, the boys was Batman. I would consider that kind of the relationship. But once again, the appeals court did not agree that Mac was disqualified. This conviction was upheld. Now, they did use Berger versus United States 1921, but once again, in the courts, it did not uphold. Now, if you're claiming that Mac was NAACP and the boys hated Garvey, and therefore you feel like Garvey was railroaded, yes, it definitely raises ire that Judge Mack had NAACP ties. It definitely raises ire that Du Bois was a close friend to Judge Mack. But I still want to make sure that we do not leave the fact that his affiliation doesn't erase the evidence of a doctored ship photo, mail solicitations, $630,000. Now, the bias can explain the pursuit of Marcus Garvey, right? They brought him. He was on with a couple of, I think it was 3 or 4 other people. I'll get the exact number, and it was clear that J. Edgar Hoover wanted him, quote unquote, out of the picture. But at the end of the day, the bias can explain the pursuit, but not the actual fraud. So if Mac alone explains it, the evidence explains his guilt. And once again, I'm just speaking to your point. Now, you brought up 8 signatories, right? Now, the one thing in debate, in any conversation, anytime somebody tells you 4 of the 8, always ask them to tell you the other 4. So if it was 4 NAACP officials, you're talking about James Weldon Johnson, stand up, Walter White, stand up, longtime Executive Secretary William Pickens, and Moorfield Story. But the 4 that were independent Black leaders were Asa Philip Randolph. Socialist labor leader, editor of The Messenger. Chandler Owen, co-editor of The Messenger. Robert Bagnall, Black Episcopal clergyman, former NAACP director of branches. John E. Bruce, quote-unquote Bruce Grit, journalist and advocate, originally sympathetic to Garvey. But as the evidence came out, as the accusations came out, he still was loyal to him. But as the let me switch that. As the accusations came out, he was still loyal. As the evidence came out, that's when he realized that he was probably that most likely he was incorrect. It wasn't just the boys. It wasn't just NAACP elites. Bruce and Bagnall with their own platform. So this was not an NAACP bias. So while you will tell us that half of the signers were NAACP, that would mean that the other half weren't, including Asa Philip Randolph. So this shows at the time, Black leadership in and of itself believed that he was misleading his people, that they didn't invent the fake brochure, and that they asked the Department of Justice to prosecute because the evidence was there. And I'll get into that when I get into my claim. Now, when you get into the statement of, and I'm trying to make this short while I'm doing your responding to your statement, so we can get into more of a back and forth. So I've addressed Berger versus the United States. Berger versus the United States in this particular case doesn't meet the requirements for bias. Just doesn't. The appellate court, they agreed that it didn't meet the bias for bias. Now, I will agree that there was a bias pursuit, but the evidence in and of itself said that he was guilty. Judge Mack, I don't have to run from his associations with the NAACP, but these are things that were investigated at the time, and they were found not lie. His association doesn't prove bias. Yeah, bias is a very not a slippery slope because that's going downhill, but bias is a very tough battle to prove uphill. If you're just saying that it's association, then that's a feeling. That's I think a lot of times in these cases, one of the things that you would have to do is that you'd have to say in regards to we'd have to make sure that we're talking about legal terms, even when we're talking about the climate at the time. I'm going to land my plane, but I just want to say this. When we're talking about Marcus Garvey, you made a statement called, "Would you let the tiger loose?" That phrase gets misused quite a bit. That phrase is in regards to his charisma. And charismatic leaders have been taking advantage of Black people as long as they've been putting pecans in pies. So to the masses in Harlem and the Caribbean, yes, he was a tiger. He was loud and he was, regal. He was uncompromising. And that's why they loved him. He gave them hope and a fire at the time that nobody else was offering. That's why I will never tell you in this same conversation. I could fully say the two things are true. He scammed people and he's an important Black historical figure to Black people. But here's the difference. Your goddamn charisma and your goddamn desire does not erase your legal obligations. You don't get to, just because you're charismatic. We fall victim to that too many times where somebody is charismatic, they evoke all of these feelings and the emotions, and then they don't want to do the book. So yes, he was the tiger that they wanted, but even a tiger can maul its own people, and the record shows that he did.
All right, beautiful, beautiful. All right, so we're gonna move on. So let's start with legal issues.
No. Give them 2 minutes to speak to that.
Who, the panelists?
Yeah, the audience, if they want to.
Oh, okay.
Y'all, anybody got a comment in and around that or questions?
I would say that Brash, you did just two of the points I had. I was gonna ask Haskel about. First was the fact, was the man committed a perjury? Because I never heard of that. I didn't think he was, but I know they mentioned it, but I never thought he was convicted. And I also didn't think I was going to ask him about the merits of what the case was decided on. Did that show any bias?
Well, I'm going to speak to that real quick. So in one of the core questions of this entire thing you would have to ask was, did he commit a crime? So by legal standard in mail fraud, the intentional use of deceit, trickery, or dishonesty to gain an unfair advantage or deprive another of money, property, or legal right, resulting in harm or loss to the victim. The deceit, brochure for Phyllis Wheatley, non-existent ship with a doctored photo. The trickery, the doctored financial reports carrying dead assets as if they were profitable with his signature on them. The unfair advantage, he grew salary and prestige while losses mounted, and then you have to prove loss. $630,000 of small investor savings disappeared. Now, I want to say something about that $630,000. Now, that doesn't sound. I want y'all to understand what $630,000 is in 1920. And then on top of that, pull this with the fact that this is not 630,000 with 100,000 here, 150,000 here, 20,000 here. This is $5 at a fucking time from the black community. $5 at a time from the black community. This is not like one person, two people. This is major fraud. So when we're saying the key to all of this, Haskel's point would make immediate sense if he didn't actually do it. But if we're saying he did it, but he did it in a racial climate, then what are we actually saying? That we deserve tigers but not truth? That we deserve charisma but not candid release of the books and the financials and careful and people using treating our cash with care when we invest? I land my plane.
Right. So we're gonna actually get to that point about the money and the 630,000 later on in the presentation. So we're gonna start here. Legal issue number 1. The BSL was not a scheme to defraud because Garvey had no intent to defraud.
Is this number 3, Haskel? Because you did 1 and 2. Is this your third legal? What's the name? Because the first one was Judge Mack. The second one was Garvey.
The first and 2 are problem number 1 and problem number 2.
Okay.
This is going more specifically into the legal issues. Even though I know I did I introduced the legal issues with Schuler, Cargill, and etc. But now we're going to go more into the minutia of the legal issues, right?
Okay.
So legal issue number 1, in terms of them proving the elements necessary to prove or establishing the elements necessary to prove fraud, right? So my contention is the BSL was not a scheme to defraud because Garvey had no intent to defraud, right? So it says the court was asked to determine whether the BSL was a fraud or whether its advertisements were mailed as part of or whether the advertisements were mailed as a part of an effort to cheat potential stockholders. With no evidence of fraudulent intent, the prosecution proceeded to paint a generally negative picture of Garvey and his officers, attempting to show that they were not serious businessmen. So I want this key point to burn into people's minds. The argument that the prosecution mainly made was mainly centered around Garvey's incompetence, right? That's 630,000, right? That they argued that was lost. They didn't make the argument that Garvey essentially availed himself of this money. They never made that argument, right? So we're going to move on. Indeed, the BSL officers engaged in unprofessional business practices that gave the government grounds upon which they could arouse suspicion of the officers' judgment. BSL accountants lost one of the accounting ledgers, right? That's suspicious, as Umar would say. Isn't that suspicious? Right? The UNI newspaper or restaurant business funds were sometimes used to pay back BSL debts. And the BSL purchased ships without expert consultation or sufficient inspection, leading to huge losses. I want everyone, again, to stick a pin in that point. For those people who always reiterate that argument that he never had any ships, no, they purchased ships, but a lot of those ships, they didn't have enough expert consultation, and it didn't go through enough inspection. But that speaks to ineptitude, incompetence, not fraud, right? So let's move on here. So the larger unaddressed question was, what motive did Garvey have to create a scheme to defraud? Right? Now, as with all fraud cases, the main motive would be to enrich one's self, right? And I think no one would dispute that, right? So let's see if there's enough there to prove that Garvey enriched himself through this scheme. So after confiscating the organization's records, the government found that Garvey took no money for his own personal use. Consequently, it was not even alleged in the indictment. That's a bombshell. Let me read that again. The government found that Garvey took no money for his own personal use. And not only that, the government never even made that allegation in the indictment. That's key. If Garvey received no personal enrichment from the sale of the stock, what motive did he have to commit fraud? Although personal enrichment was not an element of the mail fraud statute, it is unlikely that the drafters contemplated that a fraud scheme in which someone would run an expensive, time-consuming operation, such as a shipping company, for no personal benefit would fall under the statute's purview. So this might steel man or might help my opponent, but I'm going to reiterate it because I want to show that I'm being candid and being honest in this discussion, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm not just here to intellectually prove that Marcus Garvey shouldn't have been convicted of a crime, right? That's part of it. But I also want to prove that Marcus Garvey never committed scamming. So don't think that I'm trying to make some sort of technical argument to get him off. No, that's not what's going on here, right? So it says, indeed, Garvey had many financial incentives for making the BSL a success. He was supposed to receive a salary of US $10,000 a year from the Black Star Liner, but it never materialized once the BSL went into financial decline. Now, how many of us believe, without knowing all these details, that Garvey basically got 35,000 stockholders, poor people, right, at $5 a pop, probably monthly or whatever they contributed, right? Never got any ships. Most people believe that. He collected all this money, never purchased any ships, and basically pocketed that shit and was living like a fat rat, right? So not even the government put that in the allegations. That is a bombshell. That is key. I want the listening audience to hone in and focus on that. What type of scammer sets up a scam that don't enrich him? Makes no sense. All right, but we're going to continue on. So as I said earlier, he was supposed to get $10,000 a year from the BSL, from the Black Star Liner, right? The BSL board of directors determined whether Garvey would receive the salary. That's another thing. He had a board of directors, right? This wasn't a one-man show. This wasn't no Umar shit. Umar ain't got no goddamn board of directors, no oversight, nothing, right? I want that to be a key point too. He had a board of directors. So even if he wanted to finagle some money, there was oversight to stop him. That's key, right? It says the board's decision in turn depended on the organization's financial strength. Also, Garvey owned 200 shares of stock, which he purchased with his own personal money, meaning that when the Black Star Liner organization or company went under, Garvey stood to lose much of his own money as well. The premise of Garvey's conviction was that he intended to run the BSL in a way that would cause it to never gain in value. Yet, in spite of never gaining value, basically sell the stock at an inflated price and collect the money. However, because Garvey had so much of his own personal financial fate invested in the project, by purposefully ruining the BSL, Garvey would have lost thousands of dollars of his own money on top of the $10,000 that he was supposed to get as a salary yearly. All right, so we're gonna move on. In addition to this financial stake, Garvey's reputation of as a black leader would have been completely sullied, right? After his release from prison, he went back to Jamaica, and he went right back to advocating for black folks. That's not a key point, but it's an aside, right? So we're gonna go to legal issue number 2. Garvey could not have known that his advertisement was misleading because the BSL's failure resulted from circumstances that he could not have been aware of. So this is going to address the whole issue of the mailing the advertisements, saying that they got the SS Weekly and blah blah blah, right? So there's no way he could have known. He could have been aware of the fact that the BSL company was basically defunct, and we're going to go into exactly why that is. All right. One would assume that to intend to devise a scheme to defraud, the perpetrator must know that the fraud is happening, right? Isn't that just logical common sense? If I'm a scammer, I got to know the scam is going on.
Can you say that sentence again?
Yeah. One would assume that to intend, right, to establish intent to devise a scheme to defraud, the perpetrator, which would be Garvey, right, the supposed perpetrator, must know that the fraud is happening.
Okay.
This is the case whether or not the defendant actually controls the alleged fraudulent act, right? So let's go over that again. Whether or not he actually controls the fraudulent act, right? Meaning that he perpetrates it himself, like mailing out the advertisements himself. That's not a necessary requirement. He could know about it. Just having knowledge of it or directing his officers is enough. I'm making a contention that it was neither, right? So here we go. However, there was no evidence that Garvey knew that the advertisements that the prosecutor identified as fraudulent would mislead people, or that the statements made in it would turn out to be untrue. This is because when Garvey expressed assurance in his own future success, he had little control over or knowledge of the two factors that would do the most to ensure his venture's economic failure. And that is the vagaries of the shipping market. And vagaries is just when shit go up and down, right? Not knowing the up and down of the market, right? And the treachery from inside the organization from key members of the organization, such as Orlando Thompson, the secretary? I'll get into that. But to suffice it to say, officers in the organization was doing bullshit and he ain't know about it, right? And we could prove that he ain't know about it. So we're gonna do that right now. So during World War I, rates for ocean transportation rose as high as 1,250%, and shipping companies made huge profits. It appeared to be the perfect time to get into the business. When the war ended, the military powers had surplus ships that they were trying to unload on the public cheaply. One shipping executive testified in front of the Senate that anyone experienced or inexperienced in the shipping trade could make money. Let me repeat that. One shipping executive for the government, because remember, this after World War II, the government trying to get, offload these ships to the public, to the private sector, right? So one of the shipping executives testified in front of the Senate that anyone experienced or inexperienced in the shipping trade could make money. It was not unreasonable for Garvey to believe that blacks could make profits as well as anyone else. Indeed, in a little over a year from its inception, the BSL had acquired 2 ships and was up and running. Let me repeat that for the people in the back. For the people who always reiterate the point, oh, Garvey ain't never had no ships and blah, 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 blah. Let me read that again. Indeed, in just over a year from its inception, the BSL acquired 2 ships and was up and running. Matter of fact, they made a run, I believe, to the Caribbean or Central America. Can't remember, but that's an aside anyway. Thus, the expression of confidence in the creation of a black steamship company was not in and of itself an unrealistic entrepreneurial vision, and it certainly was not a fraudulent act. And I'm almost coming to the end. We're going to do the same thing as we did with the first part. We're going to address legal issue 1 and 2. We're going to get my opponent's spiel on that, right? All right, so here we go. All right, so here we go. So by the time that Garvey began the BSL in May of 1919, he could not have known that it was possibly the worst time in history to enter that industry. By 1922, the U.S. Shipping Board would announce a loss of U.S. $51 billion and $44 billion the following year. So in 1922, a $51 billion loss, 1923, a $44 billion loss. And that is industry-wide in the shipping business. That's key. In fact, the president at the time, Warren Harding, introduced the Ship Subsidy Bill in February of 1922, proposing that Congress subsidize the U.S. Shipping Board to reduce government operating costs. Opening a shipping company during this time was like opening a mortgage company on the cusp of the U.S. housing crisis in 2008. Although it may have seemed like a great idea only 3 years ago, by the time Garvey filed all his papers and opened up for business, the industry itself had collapsed and he never even had a fighting chance. Many other shipping lines also failed during these 3 years, including the Polish Navigation Steamship Company. Many of these other companies still ran advertisements. Let me repeat that. Many of these other companies still ran advertisements. However, none of these other lines were sued for fraud based on their overconfident advertisements, primarily because the market fluctuations that determined their fate were not foreseeable. Only Garvey was singled out and indicted for continuing to engage in advertising during the market downturn. Even if the commercials were overly optimistic or unwise, such optimism did not constitute a crime of fraud. And I'm going to land there.
All right, take 2 minutes. Anybody want to ask any questions? And then we're gonna finish on this third part, right? How much more do you got to present? Because then I don't want to take too long. I got to present some. I'm just basically answering your stuff, and then I got.
All right, so let me see if I could compress this down.
Yeah, just like you go 3, I'll go. I can go 2. I don't got to go that long. Pause.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take out some excerpts of key points,
Okay.
and yeah, I'm gonna do it so we could close things up. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so well, 2 minutes. I'll do 2 minutes. Y'all go. Anybody want to speak to something in 2 minutes?
Yes, can I throw a question out? This, for one, this is fascinating, very impressive. Love the topic, love the debate. Really learning a lot. Help me out with y'all sources. Where are y'all pulling from? I'm gonna be able to follow back up with some of these and take some of my notes.
I'm gonna give you my entire presentation when we're done, and it's sourced out.
That's what's up.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm gonna put the
It's just a lot.
I'm gonna put it's a lot. I'm gonna put the I'm gonna put the article I'm reading from in the chat, and everything is in there. All the sources that the person who wrote the article and everything.
Thank you.
For
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So yeah, it's a lot, you know, and
It
I
is a
want to
lot.
say
Once you start
something.
getting into this, it's
Yeah,
it's a lot.
I want to say something before we continue. Right, is that, you know, business is difficult. The vast majority of businesses fail. The vast majority of relationships fail. Forget business. You know, if you think about it, right? Most relationships fail. Most romantic relationships fail. Most friendships fail. Most business relationships fail, right? Because it be a lot of shit going on in life, bro. And it's tough because in 2025, most people not going to take the time to go into the details of what happened and blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? They just going to look at, hey, nigga, you was claiming you had some ships, and then you lost all them people money. You a scammer. You feel me? And I like the analogy that the brother used. It was like opening a mortgage company before the mortgage housing collapse, and advertising to people, hey, invest, we're gonna do this. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Brass.
Okay, so failure is common, fraud isn't. So I don't want to, and I want to stay on this point. We're talking about the fraud, not the officers within his company, not the climate at the time. I'll bring up one part of the climate, but failure in and of itself in business isn't a crime, but fraud is. And whatever other businesses failed, I'm not talking about them. Will I see to the point that he was targeted by Hoover? Because I already said that, yes. Will I see to the point that this is 1920s and the racial climate at the time? Yes. But in the very same damn token, did he commit the crime? Yes. So I'll say failure isn't a crime, fraud is. Most businesses don't mail doctored photos of ships they don't own. Garvey did. I'm assuming, I don't know, I wasn't prepared to have that conversation, but just based on the time, especially with Harding subsidies, I'm familiar with those. Plenty of shipping companies went bankrupt after World War One. Yeah, World War One. But Garvey went to prison because he crossed the line into the sea. So if all we had was failure, then he would just be a tragic dreamer. But when that failure is covered up with false ads and fake numbers, that's fraud by definition.
What do you make of the real quick, Brass? What do you make of the point about other companies doing the same type of advertising because they believe that things are basically going to turn around?
I'm about to get into that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm about to get into that right now. So if everyone lost money, why would they single out Garvey? If everyone was, if other people did what Garvey did, then cool. I mean, then if other people did what Garvey did, but they didn't get arrested, then okay. If we can find a case where it happened, then cool. But I want to stay on the conversation with Garvey. Plenty of U.S. shipping, the U.S. Shipping Board dumped its fleet during that time. And bankruptcy isn't fraud. But Garvey wasn't indicted for bankruptcy. He was indicted. I'm going to stick to this point because a lot of times in these conversations about Garvey, we get into the emotions. We get into that he's a tiger, he's a historical leader, but he was indicted for mailing brochures of ships that he did not own. Other ship owners, I don't know if they put out doctored photos and fake ads. We're not talking about them, but I know that Garvey did. That's the line between failure and fraud. Hardin's subsidies do not explain why BSL failed. The subsidies don't explain why Garvey lied to his investors. While market collapse is a tragedy, I am in the real estate business, tenants, properties, and commercial real estate. If I commit fraud after the housing crisis, my excuse is not that the housing crisis forced me to do it. My pen and my deceit caused me to do it. So now when we're talking about I'm trying to address a couple of your points. the U.S. Shipping Board, you brought them up. To be clear, the reason why they announced huge losses and admitted that many ships were uneconomical is because after World War I, the U.S. Shipping Board owned a massive fleet of war surplus ships. Many of those ships were obsolete, overpriced, or unseaworthy. The glut of ships on that market. Hold on one second.
So the government scammed the people. I want people to make a note of that.
I didn't talk while you was talking.
My bad.
I didn't say a word on purpose. The board announced huge losses and admitted many ships were uneconomical. Right? He was correct about that. But those glut of ships on the market, they drove the freight rates down. So the private companies were devastated, obviously. The Black Star Line, when they bought those ships at the post-war prices, like the Yarmouth for $165,000, by 1922, those ships were nearly worthless, so the company collapsed financially. Fine. He says Garvey's claim was that this was structural sabotage by the U.S. government and big shipping interests. You were right about Harding and the subsidies. It was the Merchant Marine Act of 1920. Now, the politics were that white-owned companies with capital got preferential access to subsidies and financing. The Black Star Line, already failing and led by Garvey, didn't benefit. So his interpretation was this proved that the U.S. government propped up white shippers while letting a black-owned line, not lines, not other blacks in the industry at the time, a black-owned line, his die. Now, I want to say something that I've learned in college. I've learned it from my parents and grandparents. Excuses are tools of the weak, and those who tend to use them tend to amount to nothing at all. Economic collapse and racist subsidies explain why the Black Star Line lost money. I fully agree with Haskel.
Hey, you sound kind of Brass. You kind of, yeah, you sound better now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Economic collapse and racist subsidies explain why the Black Star Line lost money. But they don't explain why Garvey mailed brochures for ships he didn't own, the Phyllis Wheatley, reported dead assets as if they were profitable, and targeted poor black investors with misleading claims. Once again, the $630,000 in question came at the expense usually of $5 to $10 at a time from black investors. So the jury convicted him not for being a failed ship owner, but for intentional misrepresentation. I'm just talking to his points. I'm going to speed up so we can get through some of this. You said that he had 2 operating ships within the first year. You're correct. The Yarmouth, renamed the Frederick Douglass, was purchased in 1919 for $165,000. What he didn't tell you is that it was an old coal carrier in poor condition. It operated on a few voyages, carrying rum, foodstuffs, and a few passengers, and it lost money on nearly every trip, and the repairs constantly drained any profit that was made from it. The other ship that he had operating in the first year was the Shady Side, pun intended, a small excursion boat bought in late 1919 or early 1920. It was used briefly for river and harbor trips, even UNIA parades. It was not seaworthy for voyages, and it was quickly taken out of service. Now, why this matters in fraud? It shows, now for his defense, he'll say he actually tried to run a shipping line. Proof that it wasn't a total phantom company supports the claim he was more incompetent than fraudulent. But having a couple of ships doesn't erase the fact of the brochures of advertising for ships he didn't own. Don't forget that. Whoever's listening, just don't forget that piece. And everything that I say and everything that Haskel says, don't forget what he actually did. No sentiment. Here's the second part. Here's a key point to fraud. And I love how Haskel keeps presenting fraud and the keys to it, because he's not wrong on all of it, but he's wrong on a few things, but not this. He did say this. But I want to add something to his definition of fraud. Fraud does not require everything to be fake. It takes one deliberate misrepresentation to be a crime. So yes, The ship, yes, he did have two ships, but they were both falling apart. And operating two ships will never excuse the false ads and the $630,000 in investor money that disappeared. There was failure and fraud. They coexisted simultaneously with each other, like joy and pain. So now you got into, and I'm about to land my plane in a second. His explanation of his failure was shipping market was volatile after World War I. He blamed the treachery of his officers. He insisted he was unaware of these vagaries that had gone in good faith, believing anyone could make money in this booming market. And he wasn't lying. He was blindsided by economics, and he was most certainly blindsided by betrayal. I agree with Haskel. I have no need to argue with that. But optimism ain't a motherfucking defense. A businessman can believe he'll make money, but if he makes knowingly false claims to investors, it's fraud. And market volatility is not a defense. Even if the shipping market collapsed, that doesn't excuse advertising ships you don't own or cooking your damn books. And you can't blame your subordinates. As any leader knows, some of y'all are leaders. You cannot blame subordinates as your defense. If Garvey signed off, which he did, he's legally responsible. Fraud law does not allow leaders to hide behind treacherous officers. Now, I want to say this about Marcus Garvey. Plenty of dreamers think they'll get rich. That's not fraud. Fraud is when you mail them damn brochures. Rising rates may explain why you failed. They don't explain why he lied. Misconception about profit margins is incompetence. Advertising assets you don't have is the intent. Now, I'm going to say this last thing because it seems like we're going a little bit long. I'm enjoying myself, but I don't want to bore y'all. But if he didn't know that the ads or report, you said that he didn't know the ads or the reports were false and that he lacked the mens rea from fraud. That's a guilty mind.
Right.
Under fraud law, you need not just a false statement, but knowledge of its falsity and reckless disregard for the truth. And that's true. He claimed he didn't realize the advertisement was misleading. He said he believed the Black Star Line was still solvent and moving toward acquiring the Phyllis Wheatley. His reasoning is, I honestly thought the company was operating and that I didn't intend to fraud. Let's just focus on the key facts of this particular case and this debate. At the time that the brochure went out, the company did not own the Phyllis Wheatley. The photo in the circular was a doctored image of the Orion, another ship that wasn't purchased. The ad made it appear that the Black Star Line already had the vessel, even if he hoped to acquire it. He knew he didn't own it when the ad was mailed. His financial statements, his reports carried dead ships, non-working ships at full value. He listed his expenses as assets. These weren't bookkeeping slips. They were deliberate accounting choices. The evidence showed he personally signed off on the company promotions and the literature. That removes I didn't know. And then if there was an I didn't know, I want to tell y'all something legally that maybe you don't know. Fraud law recognizes willful blindness. If you deliberately avoid learning the truth, the law treats it as knowledge. Example, if you mail out brochures without checking whether the ship exists, that's reckless disregard, and that equals intent. The Second Circuit 1925 appeal affirmed that the jury was entitled to infer intent from mailing false ads and the fact that Garvey knew or should have known that the ship wasn't in the fleet. Here's my last 30 seconds. The ad pictured in the ship he didn't own. It was a doctored picture of another ship that he didn't own. He hoped to buy it later. It doesn't change the fact that the ad was false when it was mailed. Fraud law covers the blindness that Haskel talks about. If you sign off on brochures without checking, you're responsible. He deliberately ignored it. Now, I'm going to say this last thing, 5 seconds. Either Marcus Garvey is the historical leader of Black people that y'all talk about, that I think that he is, but I think that Haskel must think that he's a bumbling idiot that don't know his ass from his hands and can't possibly realize that you cannot dock Fraud has nothing to do with feelings, and it only takes one case. So here's the thing: on my side, I only have to prove that he knew about one deliberate misrepresentation. I prove that there's dozens of deliberate misrepresentations, which equals fraud. I land my plane.
All right, so I'm glad my opponent brought up the SSL Yarmouth, right? Because that was the first ship that Garvey purchased after 3 months of forming the company, right? So as he has already stated that, they paid $165,000 for the ship, and that was in 1919, as I said, 3 months after forming the company, right? Now, there was a guy named Joshua Cockburn, right? He was one of the only people in the organization that was qualified to be a ship captain at the time. Garvey ain't know that after he paid that $165,000, the company that they paid the money to, they gave Joshua Cockburn, which was a captain in Garvey's company, they paid him a kickback of $1,600, right? And another officer in the company said, "Man, that ship ain't worth nothing but $25,000." So I'm gonna establish that Joshua Cockburn fucked over Garvey. He knew that ship wasn't worth nowhere near 165,000, 25,000 at the most. And not only did he do that, him and the person who they purchased the ship from, they got in collusion to scam Garvey, right? Ship ain't worth but 25,000. That's $140,000 loss right there. Actually, it's going to be more when you hear what I say later, right? But just think about it. Of the 630,000 that my opponent keeps harping on, about 150 to 200,000 of that was lost on this ship. Now, what I'm proving in this debate is that Garvey is not a scammer. If you want to call him a bumbling buffoon, a goofball, hey, have at it. Have at it. Have no. I would disagree with that, because you have people who are more experienced in the business and they lost their shirt, but they got subsidized, right? That's the big difference. Much less a person who was not inexperienced, right? He was perhaps too ideological, he was too much of an idealist, right? But he got fucked over. He got fucked over. There's no fraud there. And my opponent also didn't address the fact that Garvey put in $10,000. Excuse me. He put in money of his own, and he lost out on a $10,000 yearly salary because this company sank. Right? What type of fraud is that? Now we gonna get into the advertisements, but I just wanted to establish that the very first ship that he bought paid $165,000. And the ship and the captain took $1,600 from the person that they bought the ship from to basically finesse Garvey. All right, so we finna move on. So now we're gonna get to Orlando Thompson, another officer. I believe he was the secretary. Let me make sure. The company, actually, he was the company vice president. Boom, 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 boom. All right, so they were working on a deal to buy a new ship, right? And they was working on this deal for a minute. So at their annual convention, they would do a convention every January. Orlando Thompson announced that they were near completing negotiations to buy the SS Tennyson. Think about that. My opponent mentioned two other ships, right? The Shady Side and, of course, the Yarmouth. They were now negotiating to buy another ship. What kind of scam is this? This is an awfully convoluted scam. You actually buying ships and trying to do shit, and this some you losing money, you losing your own money, you losing out on What kind of scamming is this? If this nigga is a scammer, he's the most incompetent scammer in human history, right? So now, this was the SSS Tennyson was a British ship that Garvey renamed in the honor of Phyllis Wheatley. So now we're gonna get into the SSS Wheatley, right? And he made one run with it to Africa. Now, based on Thompson's assurances that the ship was fit to make that trip, right? Garvey traveled to the Caribbean and Central America in early February 1921 to raise funds for the ship. to raise funds for the ship purchase by selling BSL stock. So now they basically was already in the hole with the with the Yarmouth, which was the first ship they bought, and the Shady Side, right? But I guess they didn't want to give up. They believed in it, so they're gonna try it again. So they go buy another ship, the SS Tennyson, which is the ship that the case centers around the Wheatley, right? It was renamed to the Wheatley based on Phyllis Wheatley, showing that FBA and diaspora love, right? Right? We love our people in America. Let that be known. FBA, we one link with the Caribbean. At least I'm gonna leave Africa out of it for now, right? Garvey entered as an exhibit. All right, so Garvey actually put a letter in the trial, right? He entered a letter that he received as an exhibit, right? He had received a letter from Orlando Thompson, which I mentioned earlier, the vice president. So Thompson told Garvey that the ship had already been purchased. Remember, Garvey is he's across seas. He's not in America, right? He had traveled across seas to get funds to purchase to purchase the ship, right? So Orlando Thompson told him, "Hey man, we got the ship. We bought it, right?" Now, here's a problem. He lied to Garvey. He didn't tell him that he had hired this dude named Anthony Silverstone, right? A white dude, and he had a little questionable one-man ship exchange, right? And Orlando Thompson gave Silverstone $20,000 in deposit money, but Silverstone deposited $12,500 and ran off with the other $7,500, right? Now, meanwhile, the State Department had denied re-entry for Garvey to get back into the U.S. Let me say it again. Remember, he had went to the Central America and the Caribbean to get money to purchase the ship, right? Orlando was responsible for making the down payment, right? So a picture becomes clear here. They're basically, what would you call it? Burning the candle at both ends or trying to make ends meet, right? The company at this point is in trouble. He's scrambling. He run into the Caribbean to try to get some bread up. He told Buddy, "Hey, get that 20 G's. Go ahead and get that." He tell Garvey, "Hey, bro, I got the ship, bro." That was a lie. He paid the white dude the bread. White dude deposited $12,500, ran off with the other $7,500, right? So now he was not able to even get back into the U.S. So while all this shit going on, he out of the country and he basically barred from the country. He can't even get back in. So the damage already done, right? So let me shorten this down so we can move forward. So yeah, so basically the government's argument was that because the advertisement basically encouraged the stockholders to purchase stock into the ship, right, or the future existence of the Phyllis Wheatley, the letter was fraudulent because the BSL would never actually ever sail again after that point, or even own another ship, right? And it says, what could be more fraudulent than this advertisement? So this is the government's argument for why this should be fraud. And it's essentially my opponent's argument too, right? So the advertisement reads, in the Negro world of March 26, 1921, Black Star Line, passengers and freight for Monrovia, Africa, by the SS Wheatley, sailing on or about April 25th. Book your baggage now. So because he made that advertisement to say, hey, book your baggage, you know, we finna sail out. We got the ship. Remember, he's acting on the confidence of what he was told by Thompson and stuff like that, right? Book your baggage now, right? Boom, boom, boom. We already went over the deposit. All right. So here's a key point. When everything fell off, the majority of the money that was collected to purchase the ship was returned to the passengers, to those who had either bought passages for those who was going to go to Monrovia, which is, by the way, today is Liberia. For those who don't know, Monrovia is Liberia, right? So they returned the money to the people who were supposed to take the trip, and they returned the money to the people who purchased stock. That's key. Those who didn't receive refunds, they did not ask for them because they wanted the money to support the BSL in the event that the venture would eventually turn around. So they knew what was going on. Some of them stockholders, they knew what was going on, and they say, "Yo, you know what, man? Fuck it, man. We got a vision. We riding, dog. We know shit fucking up, but we gonna ride till the wheels fall off, right?" So they said, "Nah, keep the bread." The other people, he gave the bread back to. What kind of scam is that? Right? So now, let's see if I could compress this stuff here. We're going to go to the appeal. So, allegations of conspiracy, blah, 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 blah. Mail fraud. Because the appellant ruling, the appellant court reached a decision a mere 2 weeks after the appellant arguments was heard. Boom, boom, boom. So, basically, I'm of the opinion that the appellate court was they basically railroaded him too. Because it was a 5-week trial, 4,000 pages. And they only took 2 weeks to reach a decision. Right? And then his lawyers. So he did hire some lawyers. In the initial trial, as we stated before, he had fired his lawyers, right? Because they was telling him to plea out. He said, "Nah, fuck that. I ain't scam nobody. What the fuck you mean plea out? I'm not pleading out to shit. I'm not scamming my people. Fuck that. I'm fighting." Right? So now he hired some lawyers for the appellate case, right? So here's how they messed him up. They made the argument that based on the statute, it was not necessary to prove specifically the specific contents that was mailed to satisfy the mailing element. Just the fact alone that the envelope was empty is enough for the court to convict Garvey in the eyes of the court, right? So they were making the argument that misconceive. Not specific contents presented evidence right to dispute the claim that. Okay. So this is how they messed up. They were supposed to argue that he was supposed to dispute the claim that he used the mail to. Garvey presented little evidence at trial to dispute the claim that he had used the mail to solicit BSL stock purchase. Right. The lawyers essentially adopted a strategy of asking the government to overturn the case based on a technicality, which is not the approach they should have took. Right? They argued it vigorously. It was a stupid argument because the stuff was mailed out. That's a fact. That happened. And the advertisement was in the Negro world. That's a fact. Right? The angle they should have took, right, was that hold on, give me a second here, because I'm trying to compress this down. It's a lot of information. We're trying to move the debate along. So, I'm just trying to compress everything into one cogent argument here. Appellate court cannot be forgiven for simply filing Garvey. Examine all right, so one of the key arguments I'm going to close out here is that the BSL never put its stock up for public offering. Instead, it only offered the stock to its own constituency, right? So the members. So he never went public with the company, right? And he refused to increase profit by offering stock to the broader general public, which my opponent could make an argument that could go towards, the scamming, because you just want to scam this little group in a thing. But basically, they should have never argued that it was they never mailed the fraud. They never mailed the advertisement. They should have argued that Garvey could not have reasonably known that that they were not going to have the money to actually acquire the ship because Orlando Thompson lied to him. And on that, I'm gonna close.
Anybody want 2 minutes on that? I'm like Haskel. When you read through all of these sources, Um, it's definitely interesting. And I still haven't even presented my case, but I guess maybe we can talk about your case. I'm willing to talk about it all night. I just don't know if the people in here or the people
No, I
watching
mean,
are
I
going to hear
think
the
y'all
whole
are doing a great job. Haskell's doing a fantastic job. So, but maybe I missed the beginning of it. So, like, what exactly are you proving today, Haskell?
trying to
So
prove.
the basic what this debate hinges on is fraud, right? Because that's what's being alleged, is that Garvey is a scammer. Now, to prove fraud, let me read the definition that me and Brass agreed to. He did add a qualifier though, but I'm just going to read the definition that I proposed to have the parameter to as the parameters for this debate or discussion, right? So in law, fraud is the intentional use of deceit, trickery, or dishonesty to gain an unfair advantage or to deprive another of money, property, or a legal right, resulting in harm or loss to the victim. So basically, logic, my argument hinges on the fact that basically Garvey fucked up, the shipping industry fell off, a bunch of his officers was fucking him over, the U.S. government itself was engaging in fraud. Don't forget that part, right? So the basic thing is, it wasn't fraud. It was a fucked up set of circumstances, inexperience, and incompetence.
My premise is that he intentionally defrauded his investors. He intended to scam, that he did enrich himself, but my intent is the opposite of everything he just said. While Marcus Garvey still being an important historical figure, one of the things that I land with, and I think maybe Haskell agrees with me, one of the things I don't try to do in regards to Black people is I don't want to ever put us in a position where our leaders have to be perfect. I think that's actually a detriment that we have, because that is not reality in any way, shape, or form. In any way, shape, or form, we expect our leaders to be perfect. We expect them to be. They got to have a jump shot. They got to be able to grow. They got to graduate from Harvard. They got to be on the Avengers. I don't expect them to be perfect, but when there's fraud involved, I do expect them at a bare minimum to be legal, especially when that fraud is $5 shares sold it purchased by Black workers to make up the majority of these funds. But I'll begin when y'all, if y'all want to ask him any more questions. Right now, I'm just addressing his points. I haven't presented my claim. My claim is a lot. It's a lot to do with the case, but it's a lot to do with the man himself. But I told Haskell I would agree to just discuss the case first before I get into my argument, because I think showing a pattern in any crime or any form of legal discussion, a pattern is very important, especially when it comes to fraud. But
Yeah,
y'all go
so
ahead until I get into it.
my presentation is
I'm ready when you
done.
are.
Yeah, my presentation is done. It was a lot more to get into. If there's anybody
Yeah.
in the audience who feel like there was stuff I should have covered and they feel like I left meat on the bone, just understand it's a ton of information. And for the sake of brevity, I had to compress what was going,
Yeah, we're
so
at
like,
2
for
hours
instance,
already. You know what I mean? I agree with
right.
you. We're at 2 hours
So,
already.
so for instance, like the machinations by the FBI, them planting like operatives inside his operation. I didn't even get into that. You know what I'm saying? And it's other. So suffice it to
I
say,
don't
bro.
mind continuing the conversation. Just so we're clear, I don't mind continuing until you're done. It's just understand that it's just you presenting your stuff. I'm responding to it.
Right.
Maybe we could do a second show where I present, I don't know what I'm saying, you know what I mean? And you can respond to that, and then we can, leave it at that. But I already know I got at least 2.5 hours of my own information to present besides what you're talking about, even if I
That's
condense it.
That's a good angle you took there, Haskell. For real. I don't know if it's like necessarily enough to win the argument, but it's certainly enough to pose a challenge, right? Because I think you might kind of like veer off into the space of him being more incompetent than a fraud to make the point, but the whole like way that you're painting the picture about him not directly benefiting from it, so at certain times not even like being available to even correct mistakes that other people are making. You're posing a good argument.
All right, so let me get into his points real quick before we get too sidetracked. So, fraud is the
Y'all hear me
intentional.
now?
Oh no, I didn't hear you before, Mujasi. Go ahead, brother.
I'm sorry. Yeah, my audio was messing up. I was trying to throw a question out to Haskell, but go ahead. I'll bow back because I'm
Oh,
interested.
Mujasi, by the way, Mujasi, in the chat, I put the source material in the chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna just put it
Absolutely.
in the Discord for all of y'all to see it.
Phenomenal. Okay, I'll hold my question. Go ahead, brother.
Okay.
Brass.
Fraud is the intentional use of deceit to gain money or advantage that causes loss to others. Garvey's Black Star Line crossed that line the moment it mailed out brochures for a ship it did not own, advertised assets that did not exist, sold $5 stocks on these false claims. Whether he dreamed of success or not, that's fraud by definition, intentional misrepresentation through the mails leading to real losses. Now, we can talk all day long. We could talk till tomorrow morning. But that statement will not change. The Garvey Black Star Line crossed the line the moment it mailed out brochures for a ship it did not own, advertised assets that did not exist, and sold $5 stocks on those false claims. So we can, no matter what I say, no matter what Haskell says, that won't change because that happened. Now, there could be reasons for it, Orlando Thompson and all this, that, and the other. But here's the difference. I just want to talk about a little bit about what he was talking about. So when you're saying that the ad wasn't mailed, right? When was the ad mailed out? The Phyllis Wheatley brochure was mailed through the post. That's why it triggered a mail fraud charge. Postal inspectors and investors testified to receiving it by mail. That piece of evidence is why the jury convicted him. The Negro World did advertise Black Star Line stock, but those ads reached Garvey's own followers. Fraud isn't harmless because it's in your own paper. It's still solicitation. So these facts that are being brought up, I don't want anyone in here to ever believe that I think Garvey is some kind of terrible human. Garvey is not a I don't think that he's the scum of the earth or that's not even the conversation we're having. We're having the conversation, did he intend to fraud? I've already proved that through his own argument without even presenting my own. The stock was put up for sale to the public, $5 shares sold widely across Harlem, the Caribbean, and Black America. That's how more than $600,000 was raised. So we proved that it was mailed. The shares were sold roughly $5 each. So this is tens of thousands of shares sold to investors in Harlem, the Caribbean, and diasporic Black communities. So it wasn't a registered Wall Street offering. It wasn't offered on the New York Stock Exchange or regulated like corporate securities. It was a grassroots public offering, but legally public. It was available to anyone who could pay $5, which makes it a public solicitation of stock. Now, there's a reason why that matters. Fraud law doesn't care if the ad was in a mainstream newspaper or your own paper. If it was used to solicit the funds under false pretenses, it counts. The Black Star Line was not prosecuted for being unregulated. It was prosecuted for using false ads to sell stock. So if we know that happened, that's the fraud. He intentionally cooked the books to further it. Now we got into these you started talking about the appellate court and him being railroaded. The appellate courts aren't going to reverse any fucking thing just because the lawyers are weak or because the case was quick. They look at the evidence. The Second Circuit Court reviewed his appeal and upheld the conviction the conviction, because the evidence was strong. A 2-week decision isn't proof of railroading. It's proof that the fraud case was open and shut. A fake ship and a brochure is not complicated. Garvey never admitted fraud, but criminals never do. What matters is the jury and appellate court found that he deceived investors, and his conviction stood until the day he died. So now I want to get into the bad lawyers. Garvey did not hire the strongest defense team. I agree with you there. And they say he was poorly represented. I agree with you there. But ineffective lawyering doesn't erase the facts. Was the jury's verdict supported by evidence? The appellate court said yes. His own role made the things worse. He spoke up for himself in court, antagonizing the judge and the jury. So a lot of his own statements during the case are what it was. So one of the issues I've always had with Garvey was, until his dying day, he never admitted what he did. So until his death in 1940, he insisted he was a victim of white supremacy, the NAACP, and a racist justice system. He portrayed himself as a martyr. Even when he would acknowledge the mistakes, he would use, like my opponent would say, the treachery of officers, the vagaries of the market. But the leader of the Black Star Line never took personal responsibility for false advertising or misleading his investors. When you start talking about the ad in Orlando Thompson, right, and the letter that he put into the trial from Orlando Thompson, I want to be clear. Letters of confidence don't erase any fraud whatsoever. If you advertise a ship that you don't own, the law calls that deceit, whether Tupac Shakur, Biggie Smalls, or Orlando Thompson cheered you on or not. It's still fraud, it's still deceit, it's still intent. The fraudulent ad showed a ship he did not own with a photograph of a doctored photograph of another ship he didn't own. That's the deception. Y'all keep talking, not y'all, people, when they talk about Garvey, they talk about hopes and dreams and all this other stuff. Don't you know that that's how charismatic people scam you? That is literally how a charismatic person, they use your hopes, your dreams, your optimism, and take they say that to your face while taking all the money out your back pocket. Even if some people got partial refunds. See, everything that he's addressing are actions that Garvey took, none of which addresses the intent. Because even if some people got partial refunds, the law does not care. The fraud is committed the moment you intentionally mislead and take money. Returning scraps after the collapse doesn't undo the crime. Now let's get to this Orlando Thompson letter. Sometimes they were calling him a shipping broker agent that he dealt with. Now, Garvey entered this letter into trial to show that he believed the Black Star Line was securing another vessel, like my opponent said. That's not wrong. Now, it's helpful as context, but it is not a shield. Fraud requires intent. The intent can be inferred from the fact that Garvey approved the brochures with a doctored photo of another ship, 2 ships he didn't own, and he sold stocks based on that and put it in the mail. It's a very simple case. So when you're relying on Thompson, that still don't excuse mailing misleading ads. He still had a duty as the leader of the Black Star Line to not send out misleading ads and defraud people to the tune of over $600,000. And there's a reason why I keep pushing the fact that it's $600,000 in that time. Now think about that. We're talking about 1920s. He defrauded people in that time of $600,000. $5 to $10 at a time. This wasn't 4 people, $150,000 a piece. This is $600,000 plus, $5 at a time. When was he gonna realize he was scamming people? He didn't, and he never confessed it until his dying day. Now he may say he believed that that the deal was going to go through, but fraud law distinguishes between optimism and representation. Optimism is we're in talks to buy this ship. Misrepresentation is that we already have this ship, buy it now. Now, were investors refunded? Yes. Most did not get full value back. $630,000 was reported disappeared from the books. Fraud is complete the moment the money is solicited under false pretenses. Returning some of the funds later doesn't erase your liability. If you run a Ponzi scheme and give some investors payouts, it's still fucking fraud. Now, no. Here's the one real quick. Did he raise funds for the third ship by selling stocks? Yes. He raised funds by selling more $5 shares. But that's the problem. And then you can go, whoever that was, then you can respond right after this because I'm going to land my plane. He raised the funds by selling more $5 shares, but that's exactly the problem. He kept selling stock. Remember what I told you about them first two ships? They weren't even seaworthy, and he knew personally they didn't work. So in order to buy his decision at that time, rather than go a different route, file bankruptcy, do whatever, his bright idea was to now, you know what? I'm gonna sell $5 stocks for a ship that I don't even own yet. So
Hey,
he sold it. No, hold on.
Go ahead.
Honest businessmen pause when losses mount. Fraudsters double down and they keep pitching. Raising stock for a third ship while the first two ships are disasters is evidence of his deception, not no innocence. The jury did not convict him for wanting another ship. It doesn't prove that he wasn't scamming. They convicted him for how he raised the money, misleading brochures and cookbooks. I'm gonna land my plane right here, even though I got more to what you were saying. By the time of these stock sales, the earlier ships were already losing money. Instead of admitting the failures, Garvey kept promising expansion. The stock drive for the third ship looked less like a proof of honesty, like my opponent says, but more like my grandmother says. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul, except Peter and Paul were black people to the tune of $600,000+, $5 to $10 at a time.
All right. So real quick, before anyone on the panel goes, I want to make a key distinction here. Nowhere in the advertisement did the Black Star Line make the claim that they had the ship in their possession. What the prosecution and my opponent is doing is they keep talking about this doctored photo. I don't even know what that means or what's the relevance of this so-called doctoring. They had a picture of a ship on the advertisement to show to the potential investors that, hey, we're going to buy a ship. It's essentially artwork is what it is, right? This is the key point, though. In the advertisement itself, it lets the investors know that they intend to purchase a ship. They never said that they had the ship in their possession. I agree with my opponent that if they were representing to the public that, hey, we got this ship, but no, it was explicit in the advertisement that we expect to have this ship, not that they had it in their possession. They never claimed that. So that kills the fraudulent shit. That's the key point that my opponent is harping on, is the fact that the BSL represented to them people, hey, we got a ship in our possession, we ready to roll. No, never happened. He told them people, hey, we expect to get this ship. That's not dishonest. That's not fraud.
Can I want
to go ahead, Reggie. Then I want to speak to that because I didn't know we was going back and forth. So go ahead, Reggie.
Okay, this is important, and it has a lot to do with this debate. It is so important. In 2025, President Joe Biden posthumously pardoned Marcus Garvey for his 1923 conviction on mail fraud charges. Once a president of the United States pardons someone, a discussion on fraud conviction, right, for whatever reason, unfortunately has to go away, because now the state, right, the state, the government has decided that he is pardoned and forgiven for the reasons right, of trial. The problem with this conversation is that the fact of the matter is that it was the trial, right, and the conviction that caused the stock to tumble, therefore Black people losing their money, all of their money. If it had not been for the government at that time convicting Marcus Garvey, though even if he made some mistakes or mistakes were made because mistakes are made in business, I don't think it was smart to buy those ships. I really don't. I think that they would have, Black people would have been drowned in the ocean, going back and forth. They were not street. But the fact of the matter is the purchase of those ships was minuscule compared to the amount of stocks that Black people put in. So if the total amount of, if he raised 600,000, the cost of the so-called ships was only roughly about 150 to 175,000, right? If Garvey would have endeavored in some other activity, right, the stock price would have increased. So I wanted to just let you both know that Marcus Mosiah Garvey was pardoned. And so it's very, very difficult now. It's the whole conversation is kind of mute. But
Okay.
if you bring that up in the beginning, that means both parties. That means that you missed this as a literature review and a research point, because then now one party has one part of the debate has to now go against the United States government for pardoning him, and the other one who is trying to justify Marcus Garvey, right? By not mentioning that, right? And in even engaging in the debate with this point not known is really problematic. I'll stop. I just want to
Okay,
let you.
Haskell knew. Appreciate that, brother Reggie. I didn't know I was debating both of y'all, but that's not a
No, you're
problem.
not debating me. I just
No,
want
no, no,
to.
no, no. Hold on. Let me finish. I'm just making statements. That's a joke. So
Oh,
the stock, addressing the stock. Now, just so we're clear, Haskell is presenting his argument for his premise. I haven't presented my argument. All I've done is basically respond to Haskell and his points, because for lack of time. I can present my argument, and the pardon is most certainly in it. There's no question that the pardon is in it, because I already knew. Maybe I mean, Haskell's probably towards the end of his. I know Haskell knows about the pardon.
No, I'm
So
done.
let's talk
I'm
about
done. I'm
okay,
done,
so
Brad.
let's talk about the stock crash, because the government charged Garvey. By 1921, 1922, before the indictment, the Black Star Line was already hemorrhaging cash, the ships were already failing, and Du Bois had already published that 630,000 had disappeared. Investor confidence collapsed before the trial. The indictment was the nail in the coffin, but the stock was already in free fall. You don't get indicted for success. So that fraud charge didn't trigger the fall, it followed it. The proof of that was in 1920, stock enthusiasm was at its peak. Thousands of small Black investors purchased $5 a share. 1920, 1921, the Frederick Douglass, the Yarmouth, was already hemorrhaging money on voyages. The shady side was useless. It was a harbor boat. And the Antonio Maceo exploded and sunk after a fuel mishap. By 1921, UNI's own annual reports showed massive losses. By 1922, the U.S. Shipping Board reported shipping losses. Du Bois published in The Crisis that $630,000 of the investor money had disappeared. By then, the enthusiasm was gone. The stock had little to no resale value. And only after this collapse was Garvey indicted for mail fraud. So that particular part about the stocks is incorrect. Now, here's the pardon. I already had this. I'm going to go to my argument because I have the pardon in there. I know Haskell knows it. I didn't know he was presenting it in his argument. Let's be clear about a pardon. most people don't know. A pardon is a forgiveness. It doesn't erase guilt. Courts have always held that a pardon is an act of mercy, not a proof of innocence. The 1923 conviction still stands on record. Now, Calvin Coolidge commuted Garvey's sentence in 1927, but he didn't overturn the conviction. The 2025 posthumous pardon from Biden was political symbolism, not a retrial. If pardons made people innocent, then Richard Nixon, Arpaio, and plenty of other crooks who would be saints. A pardon is not an exoneration, it's politics. The fraud evidence was never undone. So here's the actual legal status. He was convicted of mail fraud in federal court in 1923. In 1925, that conviction was upheld on appeal by the Second Circuit. In 1927, Coolidge commuted his sentence, early release, but he did not vacate the conviction. In 2025, President Biden issued a posthumous pardon pushed by Caribbean leaders and activists, but the conviction was never overturned. A pardon in U.S. law is a forgiveness of a crime. It does not equal expungement, retrial, or declaration of innocence. Supreme Court precedents, Verdict v. United States 1915, states a pardon carries an imputation of guilt. Acceptance of a pardon is an admission of it. So Coolidge commuted him for political peace. Biden pardoned him for historical symbolism, and neither changed the fact that he mailed false brochures, took $5, $10 stock prices at a time from the Black community, and his conviction still stands historically and legally. It's not an exoneration. Now, I want to speak to the last point that Haskel made in regards to the picture of that vote. Hold on, real quick.
That advocated for Marcus.
I can pull that up, but I wasn't prepared to debate you too.
It was Howard University.
Okay, but I wasn't prepared to debate you too. Just give me a second. I'll address it, but let me just speak to the last thing Haskel said, and then I'll talk to you about it.
The record. It's okay.
Okay. No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. It was successive Jamaican prime ministers from both parties supported a U.S. pardon. P.J. Patterson, Edward Siega, and Andrew Holness. Jamaican's parliament passed resolutions lobbying Washington. Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley voiced support for Garvey's global recognition and backed pardon. Other Caribbean governments, leaders from Trinidad, Tobago, Guyana, St. Kitts, and Nevis signed regional CARICOM statements supporting Garvey's exoneration. CARICOM called for the U.S. to clear Garvey's name as part of the reparatory justice demands. International advocacy, Jamaican diaspora organizations and scholars pushed alongside the official Caribbean governments. Now, this is why they wanted it done. Garvey is seen in the Caribbean as a national hero. He is Jamaica's first national hero. I don't agree with that, but that's neither here nor there. Leaders framed the pardon as symbolic justice for a man who inspired independence and anti-colonial struggles. The pardon was about legacy, not law. It also, now I do know of Howard being a part of that also, but those are the Caribbean leaders, just in case you ask. But I want to go to the ship part real quick. Now, in regards to that thing where you said that it doesn't prove ownership, we got to understand something, that we're talking about law. This isn't a panel in the conscious community where we could just say things and just believe that, oh, well, this erases that, or it's not a picture, or anything like that. The advertisement misleaded. Now I'm looking at the actual advertisement. The ad stated that the ship, by wording and photo, that the ship was in Black Star Line's possession. That's the heart of the fraud charge. The fraudulent ad showed the Phyllis Wheatley with a photo of a ship Garvey didn't own, described in the present tense as part of his fleet, and asked for money on that basis. That's the lie. Hopes for the future is not a crime. Now, why this matters legally, not in the conscious community, why this matters legally, fraud law doesn't let you play word games. If you present an asset as real and current when it's not, that's misrepresentation. Even if Garvey hoped to secure the vessel later, the ad falsely claimed. So the Phyllis Wheatley circular was entered into evidence at trial in 1923. It showed a photo of the Orion, not owned by the Black Star Line. It presented the photo as the Phyllis Wheatley, a new liner for the Black Star Line. The copy referred to the vessel as now part of the Black Star Line fleet. Phrasing varied in testimony, but it was represented as an active possession. Investors testified that they understood from the ad that the ship was owned by Garvey's company, and they sent money on the belief that he had the ship. So just so we're clear, it's fraud doesn't require him to say, I have the title in my hand. It's enough that the language and imagery by law led investors to believe the ship was already theirs. If Garvey had said, we hope to buy this ship, there would be no fraud. But the ad claimed that it was part of his company and he solicited money on the basis, and that's where the jury found intent. I covered every single piece of the definition that Haskel gave. I'll land my plane.
Yeah, so I'd like for you to read the ad because I'm looking at it myself. I want you to read in the ad the language that you're claiming that says that he made a claim that they had the ships
Give
in
me
there.
1 second, Haskell. I ain't bullshitting. I got to use the bathroom. I'm not even capping. You can read it yourself. I got to run to the bathroom, though. No question. You can read it.
So,
you're looking at it. You read it.
No. I want you to read it for effect. Because what you reading like from them sources, that's not in the advertisement, in my opinion. Now you might see it a different way. So, let's and then keep in mind also that he wasn't there when this shit got mailed out.
While he's gone, I just want to add that Marcus Garvey, right? Remember, it's a corporation. Marcus Garvey, he himself was tried, right? And so the pardon exonerated him, right? So that took away the guilt. And all I'm just trying to do is not trying to win an argument. I'm just trying to bring in facts. It should be a part of no matter what we believe, it was the trial. And it was, if anybody could read, it was Howard University School of Law, right? Professors and students that brought about this, and the support from the Caribbean, that's okay. But this was a United States issue, and it was Howard University School of Law. So it was one of our institutions that did the study and asked for the pardon. I just want to add a little history and little facts, but I think it was a real good debate. I just think that these are issues that are kind of moot only because of the pardon and the exoneration. Thanks. And I'm not.
Can I add something?
Real quick, let me say something to I actually agree with Brass about the whole pardon thing. He has not been exonerated. You use the word exonerate. He has not been exonerated. He has been pardoned. And to Brass's point, and it's a fair point, that does not mean that he was not guilty. But go ahead, CB.
Only to put it in layman terms, only guilty people can get pardoned. People don't like to hear the truth, but only guilty people can get pardoned. So sometimes getting a pardon after your death is not what you want. You want exoneration. But however, what the big ticket item that Brass has is the money, the 630,000, which at the time was a large sum of money because the average house at that time was $10,000. So it's a lot of money. It's like 63 houses in today money. The actual value for inflation is about $12 million.
Okay.
Right? So that is what Brass has. That is what Brass is using. Because when you account for the money, it's not adding up. It's not adding up. And if you can't add up the money, they're going to say, where the rest of the money? It's the same. I won't say what I'm going to say. But
Okay,
even the
well,
ships,
I
even the ships.
want to correct myself to say yes. Okay, I'm sorry about that. But the Howard University School of Law is still working on the exoneration of Marcus Garvey.
Yeah.
So it's ongoing. I just want to add that. Sorry, y'all were right, but Howard University School of Law is still working on exoneration. Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah, we know that. We know that. I know about this because the Rastas in Jamaica has always been asking for exoneration of Garvey. So we understand that. Haskel understand that too. But what Haskel, I know what Haskel is saying is that one, he was put in a situation where he couldn't win. He could not win. And even then, after they defamed him, they let him out of prison. He didn't serve his full term because the job that they wanted done was done. Right? So if you look at all of the factors, if he was that guilty, why did they cut his sentence short? It's because the aim was to discredit him and they did it. And to besmirch his name and they did it. Right? But Garvey didn't leave America a rich man, as he should if he had 630,000, if he even had 300,000, if he had 200,000. When Garvey came back to Jamaica, Garvey was a broke man. Right? Garvey came back to Jamaica a broke man. And soon after, Garvey left for England because he was broke. So, where were the fruits of his fraud? Where were the fruits of his fraud? And he wasn't a drinker, he wasn't a womanizer, he wasn't a gambler. So we can't say he squandered the money. He came back a broke man. So that's his argument for me. All right,
And
go ahead.
here's another key point, right? Regarding the advertisements. Keep in mind, where these advertisements were sent out, Marcus Garvey was not in the United States. Remember that. He was not in the United States. He was acting on the confidence of Orlando Thompson. Orlando Thompson told him that the ship had already been purchased. So no doubt about it, he saw the ad, right? So I'm not saying that he didn't see the ad. His officers probably, maybe they mailed it to him, or I don't know how. Actually, now that I think about it, it's a chance that he probably never even saw the ad.
Wrong. So I'm back.
Real quick,
Yeah, go ahead.
real quick.
Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
Because that's only tangential to my point. Let's
Okay.
presume that he did see the ad, right?
Mm-hmm.
He did so from overseas,
Uh-huh.
and he was acting in good faith and on the reasonable belief that the company had already purchased the ship.
Mm-hmm.
That's key. But go
Okay.
ahead.
He was in Harlem when the ads went out. So just that I mean, we could talk about that point, but he was in Harlem. The Phyllis Wheatley brochure and related solicitations were mailed around 1920, 1921. At the time, Garvey was based in Harlem, New York, running the UNIA and the Black Star Line, headquartered at 56 West 136th Street. He traveled to Jamaica, but during the crucial period when the ads were issued and mailed, he was in the U.S. and actively running the company. But here's the key. It doesn't matter. No fraud law covers conceiving the scheme, approving the materials, and directing the use of mail. The physical mailing could be done by staff, but Garvey's leadership role and approvals and his signature tied him directly. That's why the indictment was United States versus Marcus Garvey, not United States versus Black Star Line. Also, the thing about Howard, right? I don't know exactly what Reggie is talking about, but that's still going right now.
Yeah, we cleared that up. Brass, we cleared that up, and Reggie admitted he was wrong. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I can't believe I would have I missed that. But if I did, I was about to throw my phone in the garbage. Here's the difference when we talk about the fruits of his fraud. I was listening to y'all as I was coming back downstairs to the basement because my wife thinks I'm absolutely insane for having this conversation after being sick. But if you're asking if Garvey was a fraud, where are the fruits? Fraud doesn't require yachts and mansions. The fruits of Garvey's fraud were the money he raised, the lifestyle he lived, and the power he held while Black poor families lost their savings. He drew a big salary from the Black Star Line. He rode in chauffeured cars. He wore military uniforms. He hosted parades and conventions, all funded by $5 investors to the tune of $630,000. Because you know how I know that he lost it? Because the investors said that they lost their money. The ones that paid him back, or the ones that he said could keep the money, that doesn't deceive, that doesn't control the fraud. Garvey got years of prestige, pageantry, and control. So where the fruit showed up specifically, Garvey paid himself a significant salary as president of the UNIA BSL. Reports suggest $25,000 annually in 1920s dollars. In today's dollars, that would be $400,000. His lifestyle: he lived in Harlem with chauffeur-driven cars. He dressed in ornate military uniforms, complete with medals and plumes. He enjoyed banquets, conventions, and entourages funded by the organization. He proclaimed himself the provisional president of Africa. He commanded a movement of millions across the diaspora, and his frauds sustained the illusion of a thriving Black fleet, which kept his power alive. Meanwhile, the investors lost $630,000 collectively, poor laborers, domestics, and working class families. I want to address your last point, and then we could finish if you want to pick it up, because I could present my case to you, and we could do the same thing similar to this. Now, the ad that we're discussed, I'm going to put it in the Discord, because this is the ad. This is now the reason why there's some confusion, Haskel, and I would agree with you with this, is that there's numerous ads. So I'm trying to find the specific ad that was a part of the case. It's in my portion, but if I get started on my portion, then I'm going to present my entire thing, and that'll be another 2 hours. It'll be at 11 o'clock. But I did put the ad in the I just put the ad in the Discord just now. Okay, for some reason it's not coming up as a picture, but I just put it in there. So I uploaded the actual Phyllis Wheatley circular. This is the literal copy visible in the brochure that I'm sharing. It says, top line, Black Star Line, the address of the Black Star Line. It says it's incorporated under the state laws of Delaware, June 26, 1919, capital stock, $10 million common, shares at $5 each. In the main ad section, it says the SS Phyllis Wheatley. That ship that's in that picture that has under it SS Phyllis Wheatley is a doctored photo of a ship called the Orion that he also didn't own. And the SS Phyllis Wheatley did not exist. It says, colored men, would you be shipmasters, engineers, wireless operators? Would you be proud to have a great line of steamships owned and controlled by men of your race and capitals? Do you believe that men of your race can do everything that other men have done? This is the motivational section signed by H.A. Price. There are two kinds of people in this world: those who are always getting ready to do something, and those who go ahead and do it. Wishing accomplishes nothing. Only by being and doing do we bring about the wishing merely dreams it never gets. Blah, blah, fucking blah. Future rewards depend upon present work and faithfulness. This motherfucker had the audacity to put in the ad, future rewards depend on present work and faithfulness. He who today is faithful in little things, tomorrow becomes the ruler over 10 cities. Be thou faithful now. The closing solicitation says, the Black Star Line believes in the above quotations, and that's why in 2 years of operation with insufficient capital, opposition from within and without the race, abuses of all kinds, still to the day the Black Star Line is up and doing, with a fucking harbor ship that don't work and another one that was upside down like a fucking mortgage. Help us keep them running by buying your shares today. Mail your check or fucking money order to Black Star Line, 56 West 136th Street. What are we talking about now?
But in the advertisement himself, he admitted that the shit was fucking up. You just read that.
Yeah, you're reaching. I said that.
No, that's what I'm saying. No, I put the ad in the Discord.
I did too.
Yeah, so you're reading from the same ad, but I'm saying
no, it
in
says
the ad,
present tense claims, Haskel. The ad says running steamships. He didn't have any running steamships. The ad says that. The ad says running steamships. And then the solicitation, he asking for $5 checks, money orders tied to the false claim of the ships being in operation. He didn't
Again,
have any working ships. He
again,
had an exploded
again,
ship, a harbor ship, and one that was
again,
upside down that couldn't finish the voyages.
again. Keep in mind, the key argument that I'm making is we got to get this part of it cleared up. My claim is that when these advertisements first went out and were disseminated, Garvey was not in the United States.
He was in Harlem, Haskell. We just
Hold on. We got to get the dates then, because remember,
1920, 1921 when the ads went out.
Hold on.
Okay.
Remember, during my presentation, there was a part where when he went to Central America and the Caribbean to solicit more funds, right? Remember that part?
I remember that part.
What's the name barred him from reentry? You remember that part, right?
I remember you said that.
Right. So I'm still working to figure out exactly, because the source you read said he was based out of Harlem during 1920 and 21.
No,
But
he
that's
was working in Harlem and he was running the UNIA in Harlem.
Yes. But
Okay.
that's very general. That's just saying that between a certain for these years, 1920 and 21, he was operating out of Harlem and running the UNIA, blah 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 blah. But what I'm talking about is during the specific time when these advertisements were sent out, Garvey was not in the country.
But why are you saying that?
Those two things are not irreconcilable, is what I'm saying, Brass. The idea that he was based out of Harlem and working in Harlem in the years of 1920 and 21 is not irreconcilable with the notion that when these advertisements went out, he was not actually physically in Harlem at that specific time. Would you agree with that? There's not irreconcilable.
No. And then I'll take it a step further. I'll tell you he was in Harlem, New York when that brochure and other stackwords, when those ads were created and distributed, he was at the headquarters running Black Star Line and the UNIA. Now here's the most important part. Even if he had been abroad, it wouldn't matter. Fraud law does not require you to lick the stamp. It just requires that you approve or direct the misrepresentation. And as president, his signature is what got him indicted. And his barred reentry, his barred reentry is irrelevant because he wasn't deported until 27. The circular dates went out in 2021.
Right. The argument again, Brass, is that at a specific time during 20 and 21, he was not in the country.
But it doesn't matter if he was in the country, Haskell. Fraud law don't care if he's in the United States.
Let me finish.
Go ahead.
I would say that yes, it does, because one of the main component in fraud is intent, right? You're alleging that he's intending to defraud the stockholders by claiming to own a ship that was not in his company's ownership. But if he's overseas and he's being told by his vice president, hey, we purchased the ship, then he's not lying. He's behaving in good faith. He believes that they have the ship in their possession.
Okay, but intent isn't about where you are, Haskell. That's why I want to be clear. We're not having a moral, cultural, common sense conversation. We're having a law mental state, knowing he approved a false representation. So the courts have ruled that the leaders are liable if you direct or approve the fraud, even if somebody else executes it. In his case, that ad was prepared and distributed from his Harlem office while he was in the United States. If he had been abroad during some of the mailings, he had already approved the idea, set the company policy to solicit stock on the idea. He had directed the ads to be mailed nationally on the idea. And that was enough for the jury because the idea was the fraud. His signature, once again, his signature is his indictment. You can't say he didn't know, no matter where the hell he was, because he signed the documents of his office on his letterhead where the UNIA and the Black Star line was headquartered in Harlem. Let's stop talking about how we feel and what we think. Let's talk about the law at the time.
All right, you done?
Yeah.
So again, I'm gonna say it again. I don't know if we're speaking past each other.
No, that's fine. If you just gonna say the same thing, then we just disagree, and that's cool. We just agree to disagree.
Yeah.
But
I
I'm
don't
saying
know.
the law. You just telling me what
Hold
you
on,
think.
hold on.
Okay.
I am talking about the law though, because
What
remember
law specifically. So maybe I'm missing it.
What constitutes the fraud? Well, the elements that that constitute fraud, right? I don't know if when you say what law, you want specific statutes and stuff.
No.
I don't
want a specific statute. Just tell me what. Just explain it. I trust you. Just explain what part of the law is addressing addressing your point.
Making material representations that you know or should know, reasonably should know, are false. So in this case, what you're arguing and what the government argued is that when he put out that ad saying that, hey, we're running steamships, that ad represented to the public, hey, we have the SS Wheatley in our company's possession. Boom. So we agree on that part of it, right? So that takes away the whole licking of the stamps and not having to be. I agree with all of that. Where I'm making the contention is that the fraud claim hinges on making a representation that you have this ship, right, in your company's possession when you know for a fact that you don't. Would you agree on that? That is the essence of what would constitute the fraud.
No. What the fraud law says intent can be proven if you know or should know the representation is false. Garvey met that standard.
That's what I said.
Hold on. No. I'm about to tell you how he met the standard, though. You're saying that that's the fraud law, but you're saying he didn't meet that standard. So I'm just saying how he met the standard. He met that standard because he signed off on the ads showing ships he didn't own. He knew or should have known. So this goes to know or should know the representation is false. He knew or should have known the Phyllis Wheatley wasn't in his fleet when the brochure went out. Even if he hoped to buy it someday, presenting it as already part of the fleet was a material misrepresentation. The law doesn't allow you to do that. So yes, it matters. But I want to talk about material representation for a second. A false statement, a material representation means a false statement that would influence a reasonable investor's decision. He claimed the ship that was in his fleet, it wasn't. He invited $5 investments based on that ad of a picture of a boat where underneath it said SS Phyllis Wheatley. He signed off. This is fucking hilarious. That's material. The material part of the misrepresentation is the material part of the misrepresentation in material representation is that the investors would only buy if they believed that that ship in that ad existed. It didn't. He signed off his signature on that promotional drive. That tied the misrepresentation directly to him. Now, here's why when you say should have known matters, and I agree with you, but the should have known is that fraud doesn't let the leaders hide behind their ignorance. Once again, willful blindness. That's what I brought up. If you deliberately avoid checking whether the claim is true, you're still liable. So even if he did it on purpose or he did it on incompetence, it's still willful blindness equals knowledge, Haskell. This is law. This isn't what we think. This is in our common sense. I'm telling you the law of willful blindness. You can't say I didn't know or deliberately don't know. That's still knowledge in a court of law. Garvey was president of the Black Star Line, and as the head, he had a duty to know whether that goddamn ship existed. That satisfies the know, that satisfies the should know, that satisfies the material, because they took investments based on a ship in an ad that had the name of the ship under the ad. The ship in the ad was the Orion. It was a doctored photo. So that's the material. Is he took investments $5 at a time to the tune of $630 goddamn $1,000. He took that's the material. The misrepresentation is when he signed off on it. Now I don't give a fuck if he was in Wakanda. I don't give a fuck if he was in Neptune. At the end of the goddamn day, he committed material representation and fraud, knowingly or unknowingly. Willful blindness is not a fucking excuse. He's either a fucking bumbling idiot or he's the great Garvey that we all know him to be. I think he's the great Garvey that we all know him to be, a great historical figure that we can learn from. But sometimes when your father's a drunk, you don't have the excuse to say, I learned how to be a drunk by watching you. Sometimes you learn from motherfuckers by doing what they don't do. By looking at them and saying, you know what? I might not do that. Hopefully other leaders who didn't defraud the Black community, hopefully other leaders would see what Garvey did, recognize his cultural and historical importance, and then just leave out all the fraud shit. So if that's what they did, then he's a great example of what not to do.
It seems to me that your argument really hinges on a technicality. You're saying that technically it's fraud. You put in an advertisement went out with your signature, right? Because the buck stops with you, and I agree. So you know what? I'm gonna make a concession. If your argument is strictly from a technical, purely legal standpoint, that this is fraud, that he committed fraud, I'm gonna grant you that. How does that sound?
I don't know, because I feel like I'm gonna agree to you, and then you're gonna hit me with the left hook. I know how you fight.
So here's the thing.
Come on,
so look.
And we can close at any point. We're just talking to other people. Other people. Yeah, we're just conversing back and forth. This ain't. Hold on,
real quick. We're done, right? But we're gonna tie this up, right? So to me, what I think this boils down to, right? We both agree, Brass, that if you knew for a fact, or you should have known for a fact, this ship was not in your company's ownership, right? And you signed off an advertisement representing to the public that this ship was in your ownership. That is fraud. We agree on that. Where we diverge is, and we could when we pick this up another day, we could hammer out this part of it. Where
I want to present my argument another day, because I want to show the pattern that'll clear up some of this too. But go ahead. We can get away from the case. I wanted to stay on the case because that's what you asked me to do. So I want to stay on the case today.
Right. So we both
where do we
agree.
Diverge? Yeah, where do we diverge though?
Yeah. So where we diverge is him being out of the country, right? And acting in good faith based on what his vice president told him. Orlando Thompson. Okay. He told him, hey, we deposited the $20,000, which was a lie, right? So he believed that the ship was purchased, and that's why he signed off on the ad.
Okay.
And legally, he was acting in good faith. Now, if they want to charge him with negligence, That's a whole different thing. But my argument is he didn't know, and there's no way that he could have known that they didn't have the ship in their possession, that they didn't own the ship. He believed that they owned the ship. That's the main thing. He was overseas. His vice president said, "Hey, we got the ship," and he signed off on the ad based on that.
Okay. I want to say something too, just so we're clear. I don't know how many times I have to say that I consider Garvey a historical, cultural, important figure. If this debate is coming off that we're trying to tear that man down, or it comes off that I'm trying to somehow disparage his legacy, I'm not qualified to disparage the great Marcus Garvey's legacy. I'm and I'm humble enough to humble out, and I want to be very clear. I think he's an important cultural and historical figure in Black history, but I don't expect him to be perfect. I'm only having the conversation because I do think that two things can be true. I say things like Barack Obama. I think he's second to the civil rights bill being passed. Him being elected president is that important for me personally. I don't think for all Black people, but I can also say in the same voice, he was probably the most murderous president that we've ever had. I mean, two things could be true. So I don't want this to become a well-seen kind of thing. I don't think me or Haskel are tearing him down. That man was very powerful. He was on par with Du Bois and them. And Du Bois, besides MLK, is my favorite leader here. And Haskel, not Haskel, and Stu Pease knows that to be true. I want to just speak a little bit to something, and then we can open the floor to everybody. I'd like to hear specifically what I think Mujasi left, but I'd like to hear what y'all think about it. I think it was done in a way. I think the hold on real quick. I think the process and how we had the conversation. I like that we remained civil, even though we were driving home our points. I just want to address two things in regards to the jury acquitting his defendants. They acquitted his officers.
That's what I was going to bring up real quick, Brass. I sorry to cut you, but C-Dot, you know, when you're not in the ring, you swear, you know what I'm saying?
I'm addressing C-Dot. I'm addressing C-Dot. Yeah. Okay.
Something to him though, Brass, because every nigga who's at home on the couch watching Mike Tyson and James Toney in the ring eating a motherfucking ham sandwich, right? They always know, oh, you should have slipped right there and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's different when live rounds are flying about, nigga, when you in the motherfucking fire, right? And for the record, I did
he did say that
in the argument, right? So what do you make of that point, the fact that the other people got let off?
Because that's in my argument. That's why I want to get into my argument. But the jury acquitted his officers because they didn't sign off on the ads and they didn't control the scheme. Garvey was the president. Well, this is also, but he was the public face. That's why he was singled out on top of the racist climate at the time. And Hoover's saying, I want this nigga gone. So I won't even run from that because that's a fact. But here's fraud law. That's why I keep saying to the law. Because if you're saying technicality is the law, then we agree. But fraud law doesn't require every officer to be guilty. It requires that the person who devised or directed the deception be guilty, and that was Garvey. So those acquittals have nothing to do with the case. At trial, Garvey was convicted. His co-defendants were acquitted. Evidence showed Garvey personally drove the promotional campaigns and stock solicitations. The others could plausibly say that they were following orders or weren't directly involved in the mailings. And does it matter? No. Legally, each defendant is judged individually. Acquittal of some doesn't erase conviction of one when the evidence is different for that one. Now, in fact, politically, the acquittals undercut the railroading argument. If the jury was biased against Black defendants as a whole, they would have sent all them niggas to jail. They focused on Garvey because the evidence against him was specific and strong. So I don't know. I don't really want to get into who won, who lost, who did good, who did bad. I just want to. I think the win is anybody who listened. I think the win is that we had a conversation in here without yelling and screaming and calling each other all kinds of fucking names and this, that, and the other. And he disseminated his information and I disseminated mine. I land my plane.
Hey, Brass, you a goofy. You a goofy.
You know what? just to get the shit out the way. I get it.
Yeah, let's get it.
Hey, matter of fact, hey Haskell, I respected you before this debate. That's why I took this debate with you. After this motherfucker, your shit has skyrocketed in my mind. I appreciate having good discourse about law, and I appreciate the culture, the history, and opinion. I appreciate that kind of shit because that's all in, you know what I mean, in discourse. And for anybody who says Haskell can't control himself, I'm gonna put this in this what's the name? Y'all motherfucking watch this debate. Haskell did an amazing job.
I appreciate that, bro.
Yeah.
Let me say something. This was a good conversation between the both of you. Brilliant conversation. The decorum was excellent. Garvey was living high off the hog. If I'm being honest, when you make mention of the parade, the ball, the trips, he was living high off the hog. You know, but was he a good accountant? No. Was he a good businessman? No. But he got $630,000. I would have liked to turn that.
Yeah, the microphone going out, brother.
Yeah. Hey, Stu, can I cut?
You gotta go out and come back. Go out and come back.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, and real quick, before Stu come back, I just want to say this. I'm gonna jump down real fast, but I wanted to address it. I thought it was a good back and forth. The debate
Is
part was
everybody's
good.
connection bad?
My connection is bad.
It's fucked up too. Yeah. Just step out and come back. It sounds like the bit rate is wrong. I wish Smalls was here to address it. It don't always be your fault.
Yeah, it's breaking up too.
Is it bad right now?
I think it's
everybody go out and what Discord is.
I'm gonna try to fix it.
Go back in the general voice chat. I'm gonna go out and come back. Maybe it's me.
Yeah, it's everybody. Yeah, I think it's the app. Let me go out too.
Yeah, Brass, you did a good job. That $630,000 hurdle is too high. It's too high.
Yeah.
It's too high to overcome. And the amount of money it was in today's term, in that day, no, it's too high. Was it intent to defraud? I don't know. But he did fraudulent activities. He was selling stuff to a boat that wasn't his. And we have to admit that that's a fraudulent activity. Was it his intent? No. Did he hope that he could get from Peter to pay Paul to get more money to prop up his organization? Possible. But whether or not his intent was good or bad, the way he went about it was unprofessional, and it led to his demise.
Yeah, when I saw the part about the
I think everybody would agree on that point.
Yeah, what bothered me the most, and you kind of get it with the research. You don't really get it with the initial information. You get it with the research. I didn't know he had fucking chauffeur drivers. I didn't know how much them fucking suits cost. I didn't know about, like, he funded, the thing that made him an amazing person was part of the fraud. He funded all of those conventions and parades and things that you saw. And the reason why I kept saying $630,000 is because for most people, $630,000 is a nice house in the community in 2025.
But in
but be honest. Years ago, $5 at a time.
In 1990, a house was $20,000. So right, so it's an insane amount of money because a house was $20,000. So if a house a nice house was $20,000,
I'm gonna assume this is my headset.
Right.
Because if I hear him clear, then it's my headset. Now, see, Doc, before you start talking, I just want to say something. I'm not about to debate.
I want to be real quick so I can jump back down.
Okay, yeah, I'm not about to debate you too, because I know.
Yeah, no. I'm definitely not about. No, I'm not about to debate. I just wanted to actually, like I said, I wanted to get a congratulations because it was a good back and forth as far as the debate part. I just didn't appreciate the last part because you was kicking Haskel's ass in the back and forth, man. And I'm like, Haskel, fight back, bro. Just fight back. But I appreciated the conversation. You know what I'm saying? If it was a, conventional debate, I think, you would have won that one, Brass. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, even though I disagree with most of the stuff that you were saying and the points that you were making, I wouldn't call you a Sambo or a Coon for making those points because you were making a lot of very, very good points. But
specifically, what
one thing,
what
No,
points
let him
that
finish,
you made?
Haskell. Let him finish, Haskell.
yeah,
Because
I
I can
just want
go.
to say, that's what I'm saying. I'm gonna give y'all brief. I'm gonna give you brief. Yeah, I'm gonna give you real brief
I got to dip out.
points
Let him
that
finish.
I felt like Haskell could have gave. One was bringing up more information about the FBI informants, what positions they actually played in the UNIA, what they were actually effective of doing. I think you should have incorporated that a whole lot more. Even in the back and forth rebuttals in the end, I think that should have been highlighted more so. And I think that highlighting not only Orlando but Fred too would have also been very good, you know what I'm saying, in a debate back and forth and expressing exactly what parts they had in it. So I think it was a lot of stuff that was kind of left out, and I think that Brass brought more passion to it. So it made, you know what I'm saying, it made his points more bright and clear. But other than that, like I said, it was a good back and forth. It was a good discussion. I just thought it should have been a little bit more. That was all. That's all I would say. That's my only opinion up there, and I think it was a great
may
debate.
May I say something before you?
I appreciate you, brother.
May
This
I
wasn't about win or loss. Haskell did an amazing job.
make me come in.
Hold on, Anathema. Hold on.
Haskell, don't attack C-Dot, please.
No,
Please don't. Okay, go ahead.
Anathema,
let him address C-Dot, and then you can come in right after that.
So C-Dot, I don't know if you were listening during the debate, but there was a portion in the debate where I said that there, when I was reading all the long-winded stuff, and Brad said, "Hey, we kind of getting, and I said that I'm going to compress this thing down, and I mentioned specifically that I did not get into all of the FBI informants and all of the people they had working in the organization because there were time constraints. I don't know if you heard that part.
No, I did. That's why I say I don't fault you. That's what I'm saying. I think you did a great job. I just think that the passion that Brass was given just made it a little bit, you know what I'm saying? It made his points come across a little better.
Ain't no passion. He was just cussing a lot. The other point is, the thing that you believe would have been a silver bullet with the people not being the three other people co-accused getting let off, that wouldn't have been no silver bullet anyway. And the first point with the informants, that wouldn't have been no silver bullet anyway, because Brass's argument is essentially hinges on that advertisement. The advertisement that we have this ship and we in fact don't have this ship. And the main contention to that is he was acting in good faith that they did in fact have the ship. So those points that you believe,
I agree.
Hey, Haskell.
I don't want you to
Hey, Haskell, are you looking at the screen?
I agree with everything that you came with.
I'm like, this is the victory cigar. This is the victory cigar.
I agree with everything that you brought forth, bro. I'm not saying that you lost because you didn't bring the right information. I think you didn't bring enough of the information, and it wasn't as bright as Haskell's was in order to make your points. And it kind of was like you was on the fence a little bit, like you was, I ain't gonna say on the fence, but it seemed like your back was against the wall in the fight. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying that you lost because you were wrong about anything or anything like that. I think all the information was correct. I just think it was more that could have made it more impactful. That's all, bro.
All right, fair enough.
I appreciate the good discourse. And now, like I said, I might be joking when I ask about the cigar, but it's not. This really wasn't win or lose. Me and Haskell were meaning to have this conversation for a while. Go ahead, Anathema.
All right. What I wanted to do is commend both of you for a great debate and discussion and decorum and all of that. I think both people had passion. But what I did like, and this is not to go and see that, but because all that other stuff is always discussed. I like the way both sides elucidated the actual court case And I don't know if that was the way it was supposed to go. And I think, say, because of what Haskel read in at the beginning, that's what framed the argument. So there was details and discussion of that. This hasn't been done before. And I think that was the thing that I appreciate love the most about it. Is the way the IDM, you understand what I say? The way the IDM I just focus around that and then build your argument from that issue, because that's the major issue to contain whether there was fraud or not the works in other community and all of them something there. So and we understand that, you know, we get infiltrated with FBI and all of them things there, and that's always discussed. But no one has like focused an argument around the judge, this, that, what happened in another court case, in order to express all those other things, you know, the ancillary things, if you understand that. You understand?
Yeah, I understand, but I gotta applaud. I gotta take a second and applaud Haskell on that. I don't know if he knew that was the way to go, but I have my argument. And when we came up with the premise last week, Haskell was saying, I'd really like to, at a bare minimum, when I present the case, let's keep it on the trial. So that's why I didn't present my argument. I wanted him to get his argument out fully based in and around the trial. I just have other things that'll show a pattern, but I agreed to his premise. He's the one that came up with that idea to keep it in and around the trial. I'm assuming because he's probably had this conversation with other people, and it ends up spiraling into all kind of stuff and what happened in the, you know, all these other things. But I think the trial is enough on both sides too. That's why I don't want to get into winning, because if I won, then I'm tearing Marcus Garvey down, and that's not my goal. My goal is just to present the facts of the case, the legality of the case, and then I like the way Haskell did it, because Haskell, sad to say, would have been a much better lawyer for Garvey than the lawyers that he had, because the actual his representation. That's why I couldn't say where he was right, wrong, or otherwise, because he was right about that. The lawyers did present the wrong case. It just, for me, it just doesn't remove the fraud. And that's why at the end he said technicality, because at the end of the day, I'm just leaning on the law at the time. And even when people talk about the acquittals, the funny thing is I'm actually shocked that all of them didn't go to jail in the racist climate of 1920s. So the fact that they either really, really, really wanted Garvey and they didn't even give a shit about everybody else, or somewhere in there, the legality of what Garvey did, what he signed off on. There's other things I could bring up, but that's another conversation. But the legality, the signatures, and then the ad.
Yeah, with that comment, I think that's part of the, you understand, when everybody else get off and you get off, it's even more of an insult to you. You understand? When you get convicted but everybody else get off, it's almost like, you know what I mean, a middle finger type vibe.
Yeah, I can get with that. And I think when people run away, Haskell, I think where people make the mistake is when they run away and forget. They try to say it wasn't a racist climate, or they try to say that it weren't FBI informants, or they try to say that Hoover specifically said, I want this nigga gone. So he was definitely targeted. There's no question in and of that. It's just the fraud is so simplistic. I wish it was more creative. It just was
that's
very
why
simplistic.
I use the term elucidated in reference to your discussion, because both of y'all had great explanation of the contrary arguments around the trial. And I'm telling you, enough people haven't done that. Y'all need to be committed. Haskel, good idea for that.
Amazing.
Because the rest of that stuff we always know, and it go down the rabbit hole. And like you said, it breed contention and argument. This kept you focused and centered and allowed you to branch off and make other arguments, but around a central focus. You understand?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I wanted it to be done like that.
Yeah, that's amazing point, Haskell. Amazing point. I'm glad you did it.
Yeah, people just tend to, most of the time, these discussions, it just goes all over the place. But Brass, I want to point something out. So I got the dates on when Garvey.
Are we done debating, bro? Please let us be done.
So this is going to be for...
Okay.
No. I want to
hear what other people thought too, though. But go ahead. I want to hear what other people thought.
So for part 2, I want to give you these dates so we know what we're working with, right?
Okay.
So he left America in February to go to the West Indies. That's when he went to
What
go
year?
get some
What
more
year?
money and all of that stuff. And let me see. The State Department instructs the U.S. Consul General in Jamaica to refuse Garvey a visa. And he wasn't able to get back into the U.S. until July 17th. So between February and July of 1921,
Okay.
Garvey was not in the United States.
Okay. Okay, y'all talk, bro. I'm not. We debated for 2 hours. Yeah, somebody else talk. I'm exhausted. Shit, I don't want to.
I think that there's not much to say other than y'all did like such a great job. I mean, the points was pretty clear. Like I think that this right. I wish I said what I was gonna say before you said what you said.
What's your verdict, though, Logic? Is he a scammer or no, in your opinion? Based on what
you gotta walk through $5 at a time to $630,000 and in somewhere in there not realize that you doing something. You gotta deal with that, bro. Like that's way too simple of a thing for anybody to understand that you're not gonna do that all in a week. And then for you to be, and for like, at what point do you realize that you like overpromising and you still collecting money? Yeah, so there's that. You talking about where he's at in the world? You know what I'm saying? I got you.
The Phyllis Wheatley. Just so we're clear,
I think that you did an amazing job with your angle.
certainly.
Right, like I think that's why it's probably not much to say because we can't do much other than like congratulate y'all. But your angle was really good. But I think your angle in some way like kind of hinges on like your ability to like soften the blow of fraud, right? To soften the blow of what he would have had to realize that he was doing $5 at a time. You know what I'm saying? Like, because you would either have to paint him as being like so supremely naive to, or just by using hope alone, right? So even if he was just like hope alone, right? Like at $5 at a time, but it's I don't know. That's just too much. That's just too much. But again,
to address
y'all did a
the
great
date,
job.
because it was said, the key date is 1919. Black Star Line Incorporated, and he bought the Yarmouth.
Part 2 that, man. Stop debating. Part 2
Okay.
that.
You gotta watch Haskel. I gotta
Make we talk now. Make we talk now.
Yeah. Everybody else talk. DQ. Where DQ at? Where Reggie? Where Smalls at?
I want to ask a question though. I want to ask a question to the panel. This is gonna sound crazy because I don't have no evidence of this. But in reference to the $600,000 in the black community anywhere, could you be a public figure and make money without being extorted or without funneling money to the underground? Because you have Hubert Harrison, you have certain man there both, and you got to pay a tax to do certain things.
He had a payroll. Let's say he had a payroll.
Am I wrong for that?
He would have a payroll. He was paying people out of that money. We don't know which people, but he had a payroll. Nobody can deny that.
Man. So when people say what happened to the $600,000, maybe that go to the underground payroll to make the organization grow. Because I don't think you can have an organization like that without some ties to the underground. There's no way. I don't see it that way. Even though I haven't heard that, Marcus Garvey was moving with certain mobster and them something and that. But I know if you building something like that and you open chapter around the country and certain people go come and you have to talk to them.
Yeah, but even the extortion would explain the failure of this company. It would explain why the ships were bad deals. There was a guy at the time in my argument. It was called Joseph Kick Burns, and he was a white man that was accused of profiting from the inflated deals because that boat, the Yarmouth that he bought it at much higher than its true value. But there was a rumor of kickbacks. then also they were talking about white brokers and middlemen that took advantage of them. But the reason why I stay on the fraud is because the extortion would explain the failure of his company. The fraud
No,
explains
I'm
the
not talking
hold on,
about white
hold on.
extortion.
No,
I'm
I
talking
know.
about black tax.
No, I don't know. No, but we'll never know. That's why I'm not
You
going.
never know.
I would assume in 1920 he had to pay somebody. That's not. Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I don't know who or how much, but see that goes back to the point too, anathema, of I didn't know this until I started this research. Because when you do a conversation like this, you automatically try to figure out where did this fucking money go. I mean, yeah, we keep talking about 630,000 disappeared, but if you're talking about chauffeured fucking drivers,
Other chapters you open.
yeah, you know, you're opening chapters, you're paying for all these. I remember the pictures and the conversations about the Garvey parades and the conventions and all of that. He paid for all of that shit, all them general uniforms, all that travel. He paid for all of that. So there's not a question of where the $630,000 went. I don't have any question. It went to him. Now, that would also explain why he didn't have it when he left the country? Because he had to show. Explain to me this.
So you're saying Garvey was like a MC Hammer?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Why did he have chauffeur drivers? For what?
Protection, security. You would have a protection, you would have security, you would have secretaries, you would have other people. The money was being spent.
Yeah, it was being spent. The fraudulent money was being spent. I listen, the overarching point I get from this debate is why I took the debate. I still need somebody to explain to me how this motherfucker got $5 at a time, $630,000 in 1920, and he didn't.
He's the greatest. He's the greatest.
Like, how did he not? Because he stupid. Because then we got to have a separate conversation. The same people saying that he scammed are calling him a bumbling idiot. In order for him to not have scammed, he'd have to be one of the stupidest, greatest people we've ever seen. This ain't bad business. This is the disappearance of $630,000.
No, but all right. Let's be honest. The administration cost for a business with over 1 million members is humongous. We have to admit that. So a lot of the money went to administrative costs. A lot of the money went to administrative costs.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'll look and see.
I mean,
I wonder if they ever did. Did they ever do an accounting? Because they said it disappeared, stupids. So I don't know if they ever did.
It was spent. It was spent. It was spent. It was spent. Anybody who have a group or organize, you have a group or organization that you're running, and when you look around, sometimes you have to be very vigilant with the budget.
Right.
Because if you have 10, 20 people in that organization and just buy lunch for 10, 20 people a day for a month adds up fast. So let us be truthful. The money was being spread with administrative costs.
Right.
Right.
Now,
right.
And if you think about it too, he had 35,000 members, I believe. But didn't the UNIA have like 1 million members or something crazy like that?
Yeah, that's the million. That's the million members he's talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
But the
BSL, UNIA, not the Black Star Line.
The BSL itself, from what I read, what I read in the debate, apparently they had like 35,000 people who were like stockholders of the UNIA, and I'm assuming that they didn't just give $5 one time. So if you think about it,
no, people gave money, but
hold on, 35,000 times 5 is what, 150 plus 25,000. That's 175,000 in one go around. So let's say three go. There's your 600 right there.
Yeah,
$15.
Yeah, but that's also 175, 350. That's like 525,000 people.
Yes. No. Remember, it's 35,000 people,
right?
Given $5 at a time.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So they didn't. Let's say they didn't just buy one share and that's it. Of course, you're gonna have people buying 2 shares, 3 shares. You know what I'm saying?
Shares,
right.
So the 600,000. It sounds like this big, whopping, just immense number. But when you consider that it's basically 35,000 members contributing about $15.
But the problem, the challenge you also got to address, though, Haskell, is we're not talking about over 5 years. We're not talking about over 10 years. The Black Star Line raised the money in 1919. The Black Star Line raised the money between 1919 and 1921.
In
The
1921.
money was
Yeah.
gone. The money was gone in 1922.
Okay,
Yeah.
hold on, real quick before anybody goes. Remember, he bought the Yarmouth for $165,000.
Okay.
Yes.
What
So much time
percentage
left.
of right? What percentage of 630,000 is 175? Roughly a third,
No,
right?
I'm not saying that.
No,
But he
no,
bought
it's
but he
not a
bought a
third.
ship.
If I
Yeah,
bought
that's
that
not my point.
450,000
Yeah,
on
that's
the
not my point. Yeah,
roughly,
I'm not saying that. Yeah,
roughly a third.
I'm not saying that. Yeah, I'm not saying that.
Roughly a third.
But my point is,
So hold on,
but
real quick, Brad.
okay, go ahead.
So just on that ship alone, right? Because they 165, they say, yo, you shouldn't have paid more than 25, right? And then the ship goes kaput, they sell it for $1,600. So in just that ship alone, there goes 1/3, approximately. Of course, I'm roughly 1/3 of that 630,000 that we talking about. Not to mention the administrative costs that
No, that doesn't work because you got to remember that 600,000 was unaccounted for.
Yeah, he said it disappeared. So we're not
So
talking about the
they already
175.
accounted for
Yeah,
all
we're
of that
not
money.
talking about the
They're talking about money that's
175,000.
unaccounted for.
He said the 600,000 disappeared, Haskell.
who said that?
Du Bois. It disappeared. It just left the
We
book.
going off of Du Bois.
No, but then that
Remember,
also no. I know that's the Batman and the Joker analogy. I know. But what I'm saying is, if you also go to court after Batman accuses Joker of doing some shit, and you get found guilty of it, Batman might be the actual crime fighter in Gotham.
Yeah, but he paid for the ship out of that money. He had two ships,
Right.
right? He had two
Yes,
ships,
Yeah,
right?
the
He bought the two
Yarmouth
ships.
and the harbor boat. Yeah,
I
the
gotta
harbor boat.
Yeah,
I
he
gotta
bought
look up
those
how
two
much he
ships
I
out
gotta.
of the
paid.
I'm
money.
gonna do that timeline.
Yeah, he bought those two ships out of the money, right? And
Right.
then the administrative costs. So I would say $300,000 of the money was used for the ships directly. But then the other thing is that where's the other 300,000? He was living off the hug. He was doing a Dr. Umar. Dr. Umar was doing a Marcus Garvey. He lived well. Nobody can deny that he lived well. He lived well. He had chauffeurs. He had nice cars. He had He had
Nah,
secretaries. He was
Stu Peas. The
yeah.
second boat cost $20,000.
Okay. So therefore, let's call it
So where this
200,000.
is going crazy. This is
All right, let's say
insane.
200,000. So we still
Yeah,
have 400. We still have
400,000.
400,000 to come, and that's what I'm saying. He was living high off the hog.
And this is why when they talk about disappeared, Du Bois wasn't saying that Garvey stuffed it in his pockets. See, that's the other part. He could have said that. He didn't say that. When he said disappeared, he was saying that the investors' money was raised, but the ships. He looked at it like this: 630 between 630 and $700,000 was raised.
Right.
What he's saying is, when you look at the ships and the assets, it don't match that. And you're
It don't add
saying
up.
that the 630,000 is that. So when Du Bois brought up the question and wrote it in the crisis, he even then, as much as he disliked the man, he didn't say he stole the money then. Well, his question was, you got
Where did the money go?
630,000 and you got these two shitty ass ships. These
Yeah.
$200,000 worth of ships. Where's the other
Where's the balance?
450,000?
Where's the balance? Where's the balance?
And Garvey was just like, it disappeared.
No, we can't. That excuse can't
You
work.
can't do that shit.
That excuse can't work. Where's the balance?
Where's the fucking money? And then when you sign off that he doctored the books, he started calling expenses assets. And then you start overinflating ships that don't even work. And then on top of that, you sign off your solution to all of this is to buy a third ship that don't exist.
Yeah. But he shouldn't have, the amount of money that exists, he should have been able to buy a third ship. So where that $400,000 went?
Yeah,
The
that's
chauffeured
harder, yo.
chauffeured fucking Harlem trips. Like Anathema said, kickbacks, fucking underground shit, them dumbass suits that he was wearing, the military uniforms, or whatever the hell he had going on, them conventions, them parades. I'm about to go into my Corey bag. Pussy, probably some drug, like who knows what the fuck this shit with alcohol, partying, gambling. Who the fuck knows? You know why we don't know? And I have all right to say what I'm saying? Because the motherfucker, his answer was, it disappeared. You're the president of a public, you're the president of an incorporated company that took in $700,000, $630,000, $5 at a time. And your answer when we ask you where the fucking $400,000 at, the best you got is disappeared, and y'all mad because he got fucking convicted? This is open and shut. I don't even need Zach McCoy for this. I don't need no bombs because I don't want no bombs.
No. What I'm saying is this. I couldn't, normally I would have pushed back. But when you do the maths, when you said that, because I never really know the amount of money. But when you said $630,000, and I researched the average cost of a house at that time, and I researched, because I use a house to guesstimate the value. Although they say the value for inflation is almost 12 million, the real value is 63 houses. Is almost 63 houses.
It's crazy. Once you put, that's why I kept pushing the number. I know y'all was probably wondering
that's
why
600,000.
That 630,000 is a fucking number in 1920.
$5 at a time. That's.
But he didn't know. See how that don't work, logic? It's $630,000, $5 at a time, and he didn't know.
Yeah, and you had to know. He had to know. So it's at what point did he realize that 100,000, 500,000?
What'd you say, Anathema?
Is that number from the government audit or just the claim made by the board?
The amount of stocks that were sold.
No, they
from the amount of shares that were sold.
They looked at the amount of shares that he sold to the people.
Yeah, so I want to say something to what Anathema just said. So it's from the shares, right? It's confirmed. 35,000 people at about $15 each average, right? So the number is the number, right? But insofar as the government, if the money was being misappropriated, that would have been included in the indictment. That was a key point of one of the points that I brought up, is the fact that even when the FBI did all their forensic accounting and all of that, they never said, oh, he bought these two ships and he took the money and was running off with hoes and buying cocaine, and they didn't say none of that.
Right.
So that lets you know that it was, like Stu P said, it was being used on legitimate administrative costs.
I disagree, but I won't. We can agree to disagree.
Yeah, because
that third ship,
Haskel, good comeback, Haskel. But Haskel, you need to save
after you done made $650,000.
You should have saved that for the second time.
You need to save that for part two.
You might have had me on the ropes with that.
Because that's a good one. So go and build on that for part two.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, you can disagree.
$630,000 in 1920 in 2025 is $11 million. $5 at a time.
11.6. I call it 12.
It would have been $5 in 2025. You got to convert the 5.
Yeah, what would you say? What would you say? 20? What would you say about $20?
No, more than that.
He said you got to convert the 5.
No, you would. No, you would. He's right. No, he's right. I just listen. I got to get my bars off too. $5 at a time is more impressive. You know what I mean? But listen, it says, where did they get the $630,000 figure? It says the Black Star Line stock sales, $5 shares, widely sold across. This is tens of thousands of small investors. They got the number from annual UNIA reports and financial records entered into evidence. W.E.B. Du Bois reported in the crisis that the Black Star Line had raised over $630,000 from its members and investors with little to show in return. In the court proceedings, prosecutors used company records postal inspector findings, and investor testimony to demonstrate the scale of the money. That's why when they say 630,000, it's really between 630,000 and 700,000. But they say 630,000 because, like Haskell said, that's based off of what they could come up with, based on estimates. So I don't know if they probably went to the lower end versus the higher end.
It could be $1 million. It could be $1 million. Trust me.
That
it
third
could be.
ship, bro.
No, it could be $1 million. Let me
is
see.
like the
Please, that's a
basketball
good point.
equipment.
Motherfuckers just donating and saying, "Yo, I don't give a fuck about the stock. Just take this because I want to see you win."
Yeah,
it could have been $1 million.
Because there's no good accounting. Anytime money can disappear like that, is that the money was coming in so fast and it was being spent. Because, $630,000 and worrying about the down payment on a new ship. In less than 3 years, you're worrying about the down payment on the newest ship. That ship should have been bought cash because the money should have been available. But the money was coming in so fast. The money was like drug money. The money was coming in so fast that was coming through the front door and leaving through the back, doing all type of bullshit. Parades, clothing, opening new chapter, paying chauffeurs, administrative costs, living high off the hog, living like a king. He was living like a king.
Yeah,
and nobody
then
can
also
deny that.
they were talking about the legitimacy of it. Even after spending, his books didn't balance. So the $600,000 raised. This is what I meant by he was showing expenses as assets. The $600,000 raised should have left the assets worth close to that. When they went to the books, he was showing his fucking expenses as what would make up to the 600,000. But instead, when they looked at his assets, he had the Yarmouth, which was a scrap steamer, a fucking party boat that was in the harbor, and another boat that blew the fuck up. So he didn't do. The gap is over $450,000. So when and then his issue, I keep telling y'all, that's why I keep pushing disappeared. When you use the words, when somebody asks you $600,000, where's 450? And your fucking answer is that it disappeared.
Yeah, it was spent on day-to-day expenses. That's what happened.
He should have said that. He should have said that. He should have said that. And then, as president of the Black Star Line, listen, we can't use racism as an excuse for just bad fucking fraudulent business. He just did. It was bad. It was even like, I don't think Garvey's a bumbling idiot. This conversation would be easier if I thought he was. He ain't no. This is the UNIA. This is Garvey that we talking about.
Yeah, but Brass, you could be as skilled an orator as you want to be, as intelligent as you want to be, right? Knowing how to run a shipping business, you don't know nothing about that. You can even be a magnet. Look, you can even be a mat. Well, you see what happens is, though, you getting all this money, you getting all this adulation, and like any other human being, you can start thinking that you are more capable than what you actually are, right? You can start getting a big head, like you got everything figured out. You know what I'm saying? Because look, you could be a magnate in one area of industry, because you see it with football, with sport team owners, right, Brass? They so successful in oil and tech and tech and whatever else they do, right? And what happens when they come to the NFL and NBA? Nobody can tell them shit, right? Because they know every fucking thing. And what happens? Shit goes to shit. So it ain't about intelligence.
Well, the reason why I say intelligence, Haskel, is because the ad that he signed off on that had a picture of a boat that wasn't the SS Phyllis Wheatley and his signature on it. It's very difficult for me to believe he just didn't know, Haskel. I don't use, and then in the law, let's skip the technicalities of legality. Willful blindness means he had knowledge. But he should have had knowledge, right? But here's my concern. I don't think y'all understand how great that I think Garvey was. So this ain't an easy conversation for me. It ain't. He's on the list. Garvey's on the list. That man inspired millions of people. The UNIA was important. But when shit like this kind of happens, I don't know if it's just hard for me to believe, bro. It's very difficult, like, for the respect I got for somebody to say he saw the ship that was on the ad, signed off on it, and he just didn't know that wasn't the SS Phyllis Wheatley. I
Wheatley,
just
right?
can't.
So
Yeah, I can't.
we
It's
gonna figure
difficult.
it
That's
out.
very difficult for me.
We're gonna figure it out for part 2.
Yeah.
So we know for a fact between February and July he wasn't in the country. So my next step is to find out when the ads first appeared in the Negro world. Was it between that time? So we
I
gonna
was
leave
gonna
it
do
to
that,
them,
but y'all
man.
said
But
save it. Yeah, I was gonna do that. But
yeah,
y'all
we
said
gonna
save
save
Y'all
it.
said
We gonna save it, man. But hey, it was fun, man.
Yeah, hell yeah, that was fun. That was
Hell
real
of a
fun.
debate.
Yeah, I'm gonna
But
close
yeah,
out
we
on
gonna
this.
do it again, man. But yeah, I'm out here, man.
Yeah,
I'm out
shouts
of
to
here,
y'all.
guys. Appreciate
Yeah,
y'all,
I'm gonna
man.
close the stream. I'm gonna stay in ChatGPT, but I'm gonna close the stream. Hey, shouts to y'all. Now it's up to y'all to take this and dissect it and see where you got some points inside and the other. And in part 2, I'll present my case to Haskel and let them debate my points versus that. But y'all got 3 hours on Garvey, and I think y'all got roughly 9 hours on earlier on. Damn, I don't forgot this guy's name already. Stupid. What's the guy that got shot, man?
Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, Charlie Kirk. I don't forgot the man on rest. It's crazy. Shouts to y'all. Appreciate y'all. Tune in tomorrow. I'm gonna replay the debate tomorrow, and I'm gonna replay some of the 9 hours on that on Charlie Kirk tomorrow. So shouts.